Have a quorum and will be exiting practice mode and going live. Anything you say going forward will be recorded.
Recording in progress.
We'll begin by taking roll. Commissioner Metz.
Present.
Commissioner Croft.
Present.
Commissioner Phillips.
Present.
Commissioner Gupta.
Present.
Chair Scharf.
Present.
For the record, 5 present.
All right. Do we have any agenda changes, deletions, or additions?
No changes.
All right. Do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda?
If any member of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or press *9 now. No hands raised.
All right, and that brings us to the minutes. Anyone have any changes to the minutes, or shall we approve them? I do. You do, all right.
Thank you. In general, I found these minutes a little bit confusing to follow. I'm not sure if there was a different approach in them, but I found a lot of the sections to be kind of not clear to someone who might not have been present. Of course, they could look at the minutes and go back to the video, but just in general, that is a comment. But then on page, I'll give you specific comments. On packet page 9, paragraph 2, it was about the fiber pilot. So in line 2, I'll just read this sentence. Commissioner Croft thought there had been an agreement that there would be a pilot after which there would be opportunity to see the data and decide if it would be worth spending the full $20 million instead of worth the money. And then in the next sentence, Commissioner Croft and Chair Scharf recalled the decision being made not to spend the money, instead of that, not to spend the full budget without an initial look at the pilot results. So replace the word money with full budget without an initial look at the pilot results. It just was kind of vague. We're saying the money, and when there's really, the concept was there were 2 buckets of money. There was one other comment I had, and let me just find that. It was on packet page 13, and again, it's at the very top, the second block, where it says, Commissioner Croft opined that for people putting in large systems, communication will be needed about the high cost. So communication will be needed about the fact that rates change over time and potential for high cost. And this comment, just to explain, was regarding people putting in large panels, and if they're expecting, rates to be the same over time, who knows what's going to happen with grid mod, with our future power purchase agreements, and that having some visibility that it might be expensive over time would be useful. So that was why I recommended that change, and that was the purpose of my comment.
Okay. Do you want to have them try and change that on the minutes?
I do.
Okay. So shall we?
I have exact text. I just read it, but I can read it again if you would like the
Why don't
exact.
you just send it to them?
You can provide that text. We can take what you said verbally and then modify.
Okay.
If that's the motion for the approval, and we can make those
Okay.
amendments.
Anyone else have any changes to the minutes they'd like to propose? Okay, then let's get a motion to approve the minutes as changed by Commissioner Croft.
Motion to approve as amended. Second.
All right, you want to call the roll?
Commissioner Metz.
Yes.
Commissioner Croft.
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
Commissioner Gupta.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mater.
Yes.
Chair Scharf.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, and that brings us to Utility Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to talk about some recent council actions. On January 5th, the City Council elected Vice Mayor Vinker as mayor and Councilmember Stone as vice mayor. The City Council also had their goal setting on Saturday, January 24th, where they went through their priorities. 4 main priorities were discussed by City Council on government efficiency, achieve the near-term priority housing milestones, the Cumberly acquisition and renovation funding, and enhance business vibrancy. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that.
So those are the four?
Those were the four. Those were the four. The other utility-related items, actions that went to January was approval of the updated 2026 water, gas, and wastewater utility standards, the adoption of the state and federal guidelines that did go to the UAC on the utility side, and then an addition of approval of professional services contract with Barron Contracting for gas leak survey services. Second, on the board and commissions recruitment, so I did want to mention that there's an active recruitment right now for the 2026 board and commission and committees. There's 10 seats now open. The deadline for applying those is Wednesday, February 18th, and more information is available on the city website. Typically, those would go for interview with city council in March, and the UAC can talk about the appointment of the board and vice chair. So right now, the first time we can meet on that is in April. There could be some determination on when those folks are appointed to push. So I just did want to mention that to the commission. Another project is our gas main replacement project. We call it GMR 25. It's going to replace approximately 5 miles of gas mains and services. In these neighborhoods, I'll list them: the Duveneck, St. Francis, Leland Manor, Midtown, and Palo Verde neighborhoods. This is part of our enhancement and reliability projects for the gas system. We are using some grant money that we received from federal DOT. As you may recall, we received $16.5 million, so we're using that grant monies for these capital projects, so we're very pleased about that. So the work will begin later this month and will complete in the summer of 2027. And then on the legislative advocacy role, staff, Chair Starf, myself, Deputy Director Lena Perkins, and Riley Galen went to Capitol Day on January 26th with Northern California Power Agency and also California Municipal Utility Associations. We had the opportunity to meet with several of the state legislature and areas. We did have a chance to actually talk to Assemblymember Joe Patterson. As you may recall, he has sponsored Bill AB 34, which extends the large hydro extension for utilities that will help Palo Alto, that will help the city of Gridley and the city of Biggs, so that we do not have to do excess renewable procurement that will maintain affordable rates in Palo Alto and those other agencies. We're very pleased that was occurred. We also wanted to thank and acknowledge meeting with Assemblymember Berman and Senator Becker's staff. They also co-sponsored the bill, so this bill is moving very quickly, so we're looking forward to getting that signed by the governor as well.
It passed in the assembly the day we were there.
It did while we were in the assembly, so thank you very much for that addition. And that completes my report.
All right, thank you for that.
Oh, sorry, I have one more slide here, if you can bring up. Just to highlight, there are some questions that, we come back with as staff that came from the UAC. What about UAC summary minutes? So the practice is actually migrating to action minutes. So what that would be, and we've talked to the clerk's office, would be simply the subject, the vote, what passed, and a summary, because now a lot of these items are going on video, which we record and link to the city website. So I wanted to kind of give you the thought process. We did go back to the clerk's office and see where things are migrating. Right now, we do summary minutes, which we have now, and obviously there are some challenges there with summary minutes, but just wanted to bring that back. Also,
What does migrating mean? Does it mean we're going to cut over to action
switching
minutes?
I think we're looking at that, and we'll take the lead from the clerk's office and how this rolls out to the commissions and how we actually post those minutes.
So typically, they would be about a page at most two, because it records a vote.
Correct.
Yeah.
It basically records a vote. If you look back kind of in the history of Palo Alto, those summary minutes are typically what they put on there in the recommendation and action taken by council. Who motioned, the vote in totality, and the subject and action. Okay.
And what's going to be the official minutes, the recording or the action minutes?
The official ones, I believe, would be the action minutes, and we will still have the linkages to the videos as well. So what would be typically available on file, and that's, if you look back in the history, just so happens I was looking back at some of the history before, we're able to go back to the 50s and see those action minutes as well.
Will the action minutes include actions the staff is committed to, even though they may not have been voted on? For example, staff will return with this item or not.
If it's included in your action, then I believe that would be noted in there. I don't know if the level of detail of its entirety. That's something we can check back on, though.
So a number of the items that come to us do not require a vote. We have a discussion.
Correct.
How will that be captured for the city council to go look at? Because action minutes don't typically do that.
No.
You know, I guess I will look at our council liaison here. I
mean,
think this is a bad idea.
I think you can do whatever customization you want, even to action items. I mean, if it's a study session or it doesn't have to be a vote. It could be, an important study session that you want to record some data on.
Someone needs to coordinate with the clerk's office about, because if they just do action minutes, they're probably, I don't know, we haven't talked to them, right? But it could just be that they just record the votes, and so therefore all the discussion is not recorded. And I don't know, how often do you go back and watch a meeting as opposed to, it's easy to read the minutes, right? It's a real pain in the ass to go back and find the meeting and watch it.
The answer is if it's extraordinarily important or there's some sort of crisis or mistake, I would say that's when folks would be looking at the full video.
So, right, but I'm thinking, maybe council members never do that, but I know when I was on council, I would skim the UAC meeting notes to see before what they actually discussed. I'd skim it, right? And that way I could look and see what the UAC actually thought about it, because most of it's captured in the discussion. Because most of the time, what's the purpose of us discussing if you guys don't have an easy way to look at that? So that's my concern. That's
Yeah,
all. I mean,
understood, yeah.
So,
Can I add one more point?
sure.
I tried to put together a calendar of what topics we talked about by month. And ChatGPT couldn't do it. It basically said, you have to go in to the city website, open the agendas, pull out, I had to go do it by hand for the last year. And so not only are the topics embedded, but now the minutes are going to be hard to find. I also think this is problematic. I was going to bring up just simply that the topics that were discussed should be very easily accessible. Like, you should be able to say, what was discussed at the UAC, look at a list, and so that you know where to go find it. And I think with minutes going to just action, it seems even worse than it is right now, so.
I think the question becomes, do we then have more votes? So for example, for our last meeting, which I don't see fully reflected in here, one of the things that I believe there was a sense of the group is we need a decision point on, fiber to the home. And, when we didn't take a vote on that, and we discussed it, it would be lost to my mind, that wouldn't be in the minutes, except maybe saying fiber to the home was discussed. So if we do this, I do think we need to think more about voting, so we are providing the council with our guidance, if that is what is going to be recorded.
I agree. So if we do move to this, I think every item would then have a vote on it.
This is great feedback. I appreciate it. No, I am not joking whatsoever. I think this is great feedback that we can bring back to the clerk's office in terms of, the retention of, having this as part of it. So we'll take that as another action item back to see what the intent is. Is there an optional way to, maybe this best fit is to do these summary minutes as they are, so.
So I will tell you that clerks have tried this several times in the past, and it has always failed, at least when I was on city council.
Well, there also used to be verbatim minutes,
Yes, there were.
which were like this thick.
I mean, frankly, providing verbatim minutes would give people the option of using whatever tool they want to summarize it, which, I mean, frankly, we have the tools to do that these days. So I understand the balance of like, you know, we want to keep things cost effective, but I think either sticking with what we have now or moving to a model in which you provide the action minutes, but you also provide a full transcript so that if you want to query it, you can.
And there may be the option of, you know, don't they provide transcripts for most of these? You use Granicus, doesn't Granicus provide a transcript? So you could just have a transcript as well as action minutes, and then people could read the transcript. I mean, that's also a possibility. We have to have better technology now. Anyway, I'll let you
It's
work.
much
No,
less
no, this-
labor intensive to do that and like let people go through and process it and query it however they want.
I like that idea for what it's worth. If we were going to vote on it, I'd vote for it.
Let's vote on it, guys. I move that we.
So this is not a vote right now, because of my director's report, but it will be in the summary minutes. So, no, I do appreciate that dialogue and understanding the importance to the commission and having this type of information. So we will bring that back.
And just to add to the AI point, I do think there are AI tools we can use to quickly summarize the transcript from just even the audio from YouTube. So there should be ways to do, if the concern is resource, there should be ways to do it in a more resourceful way using AI tools. And I thought about a year ago, the city started a pilot with UAC and city council using an AI summarization tool.
You're bringing up some very good points because, you know, for the just members of the public, when you come here, you sign in with a card, right? So that could be tied to your mic and some of those transcripts. So I don't know all the technology that we currently possess here at the city. We'll take this back to the city clerk's office and, you know, maybe twist a few arms over at IT to see if there's some other opportunities there. So
Thank you.
any other comments that I could take back with me?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Some members of the public were trying to get in.
Yeah, I don't know, I got an email that someone was waiting on Zoom to be admitted.
I am not showing any attendees trying to join or anybody in a waiting room.
So why don't you email them back and tell them that, you know, we can take, if it's public comment not on the agenda, happy to take it later if you didn't get in.
Yeah, maybe if the member of the public could try to relog in, that would be helpful, and we can take them off. Just the third item there, before I forget, is the update to the fiber at the premises. You know, the pilot and the metrics, it is on the 12-month schedule. It's scheduled, I believe, in July. And we're going to adjust that based on kind of the uptake and how we do that rollout and getting customers so you have good metrics. But just wanted to mention that that's where we'll be discussing kind of our early look and on the progress. And that really completes my report.
Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to add a couple sentences to elaborate on the director's comments on priorities this year. We shifted rather significantly from the past, and essentially we got into a bit of a nomenclature definition, which we have to do, but in the past, we've had 4 sort of broad priorities, and then below that are objectives, that this year was about 70 for work for the staff to accomplish, to meet the goals, to meet the priorities. We also have this thing called Palo Alto values, and the idea this year was to take most of last year's priorities, one of which is very important to this commission, being the whole climate action thing, and roll that into values so that we haven't lost any of that as one of the, I'll use my own word now, goals that we're really focused on. And what it does is it frees up the opportunity to have all the objectives, but they don't have to be tied to just the year's priority, which are a little bit more short-term. For example, like Cubberley, that's a very, maybe it's a short-term, but it's a year focus. It's not going to be a 5-year focus, whereas climate certainly will be. And so we sort of elevated that to values of the city. So not to worry, we didn't lose any of that stuff. We just made it more functional and executable. And I think we're going to call the objectives more like the city's work plan, to get done. It's an implementation plan to get done what we want to get done in the year, so.
Can you put a little more meat on the bone on the government efficiency one? I was curious as to what you guys are actually looking at.
That was pretty remarkable in the sense that it's out there, but a couple people brought it up, and a couple other people said, this is perfect, and this was even beforehand when we were planning for the retreat. But generally, it's, we have budgets, and we obviously want to be efficient with how we spend money, but the idea is to look at, the most efficient way to manage various items within the city, budget and otherwise. My favorite example is the problem we have with getting a functional 311 system. The last thing you'd want to do is say, oh, well, we better just throw more bodies at that, and that'll fix it. That won't do anything. We have to have a strategic look as what's the problem that we're trying to fix? Is this for a department, 2 departments, the whole place? It has to have a strategic approach to that before we ever get to thinking about adding bodies and how many and all that. So sort of systemic approaches sometime as opposed to knee-jerk. Let's solve this problem quickly. So that's the kind of thinking that we're trying to get in the work plan for staff to execute on some of these things, just as an example.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess that brings us to our first item, which is the background and discussion on data centers in Palo Alto.
So I'm going to be joined as a team as they walk up here. So we're very pleased to talk to you about data center competitiveness in Palo Alto. I'm going to introduce some of our staff here. Terry Crowley is our Chief Operating Officer. He's in charge of our grid mod. His staff does a lot of direct contact with, potential folks that want to talk about connecting to Palo Alto utilities on the engineering side. Dr. Lena Perkins is our acting deputy director in charge of legislative regulatory affairs, and also is key into our long-range planning and resource procurement. And then Catherine Fortenberry, she is actually the city manager's office fellow. She's been rotating through departments in the city, and one of her tasks was to do a lot of research and corral us all together in terms of putting together this presentation. So as part of this program, Catherine is actually going to give this presentation. So what I'm going to ask of the commission is that to give Catherine about 8 to 9 minutes to go through those slides. We really want you to potentially hold your questions to that end. All the slides are numbered, and staff can do a deep dive on any of your interests. We're really trying to extract and have that discussion with you. We anticipate data centers is a big topic, right? It's being not only discussed, in Palo Alto and throughout the state. It has gone to the Assembly Commission of Energy. They had a hearing on this recently as part of the California Municipal Utilities Association. Collectively, all the electric utilities are creating a working group as data centers are expanding, not only in, frankly, the local Bay Area, but also kind of secondary markets, what we call Los Angeles, and no joke. So appreciate that. So I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, and she's going to go through the presentation.
Thank you, Director Curatori. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Catherine Fortenberry. I'm the Management Fellow in the Utilities Department, and I am here to present background and discussion on data centers in Palo Alto. Next slide, please. So just to highlight some things we're going to talk about this evening, we're going to frame the discussion around your work plan goal, and then we're going to look at data center background and market context. Then we'll go ahead and examine the current data centers in Palo Alto and what future integration can look like. Then we'll examine some best practices for integrating data centers, and we'll wrap up by laying out what input we're seeking from you. Next slide, please. So this discussion tonight is part of the Commission's work plan item on electric system and supply, specifically as it relates to data center competitiveness in Palo Alto. Next slide, please. I'm going to move fairly quickly through this next section of slides on background, as it is intended primarily for your reference. At a high level, data centers are physical facilities that house servers and computing infrastructure. Cloud computing services are what you see predominantly in the greater Bay Area. Next slide, please. Here are some actual photos of a range of data center sizes. These are located in Santa Clara and San Jose. These are a good example of Greater Bay Area trends of size and scale of data centers. Next slide, please. There are two broad models of data centers: self-perform facilities and multi-tenant or build-to-suit facilities. These edge case applications are important for Palo Alto's context because those data centers need to locate next to research facilities and startups. Next slide, please. For context nationally, data center electricity demand is growing rapidly, largely driven by AI. Next slide, please. Silicon Valley is a major national data center market. You can see where it is situated on the graphic in relation to other markets around the US. And to clarify, Silicon Valley in the graphic represents the South Bay Peninsula. And since this graphic was published, another 2 gigawatts of data centers are planned in San Jose alone. So this data center acceleration we've seen in the industry and in our region is continuing. Next slide, please. The Data Center Coalition has compiled this list of core things data centers consistently look for when scouting facility sites. Those include access to fiber, water, reliable electricity, predictable permitting processes, access to skilled labor, and reasonable time to market. Next slide, please. Data centers are interested in Palo Alto because we are low cost, green, have a good climate, and are in close proximity to researchers and the tech workforce. Next slide, please. I'll now share some impacts of data centers in Palo Alto thus far, as well as look ahead to our competitiveness for any data centers that may wish to locate in Palo Alto. Palo Alto has had data centers since the 1990s, and because data centers have stabilized total electricity sales, without recent data center additions, rates would be roughly 5% higher than they are today. We've had about 10 megawatts of recent load growth and expect another 5 to 10 megawatts in the next 5 to 10 years. There are lots of developers shopping for capacity, so we've had highly speculative inquiries for much larger facilities. This you can see demonstrated in the graph as the light-colored bars. Next slide, please. We have a range of forecasted demands. For this slide, we're looking at the solid gray line in the graph. The core point looking ahead to 2035 is that about half of the city's projected electric growth is forecasted to come from data centers. We've had 10 megawatts of data center load growth come online out of about 14 megawatts total expected. Next slide, please. Due to departure of industry and efficiency measures, Palo Alto electricity sales declined from 1998 through 2021. Data centers currently account for about 15% of electric sales for the utility. Importantly, even with data center growth, Palo Alto's growth is forecasted to be modest. For context, Palo Alto averages 110 megawatts, so a single 25 megawatt edge case data center would be an addition roughly equivalent to a 20% increase in electric sales. Next slide, please. Conversely, the city of Santa Clara had similar electricity sales as Palo Alto in the 1970s and is currently 5 times larger than Palo Alto, and it is projected to be 10 times larger. This is due to their data center growth strategy they've implemented since the year 2000. The orange in the graphic depicting Palo Alto's sales is the same as the forecasted growth shown on the previous slide. This shows how modest our projected growth is currently. Next slide, please. This slide highlights revenue contributions of data centers in Santa Clara. Of note, each additional megawatt of data center load contributes roughly $56,000 per year to their general fund and makes up 13% of their city budget. Next slide, please. This slide lists some positives we've identified with integrating data centers. Some are that data centers support innovation, they contribute to a competitive economy, they drive economic growth and revenues to the city. Next slide, please. I'll now discuss considerations and best practices for integrating data centers. On this slide is a map of our land use breakdowns. Currently, data centers are permitted in light industrial and research/office park zoning districts. Those areas you can see in gray on the map. And you can see that's focused around the Stanford Research Park and around the Highway 101 corridor. Next slide, please. Here's a schematic of an integration of a 50 megawatt data center for your reference. And I want to highlight that a large 50 megawatt data center would interconnect with the 60 kV system, and the data center would pay for associated costs with the new dedicated substation. Next slide, please. And here is a summary for your reference of our competitive niche in Palo Alto, which lies with data centers that are 50 megawatts and below. Next slide, please. Some best practices for integration include building a shared understanding of expectations on interconnection timelines and developing conditional use permit rules to address things that may arise during the integration process. It's also standard practice to carefully structure contracts so that facilities requiring electric grid expansion are responsible for the associated fees. There's a real opportunity here for data centers to be grid assets because they are large, potentially flexible loads. Next slide, please. I'll close with the specific input staff is seeking from the commission. Next slide, please. We'd like the commission's thoughts on the community perspective related to data centers, including your thoughts on making it a priority to attract new data centers, staff's recommendation to explore conditional use permit rules for future data centers, and community considerations for data center projects of varying scale. I thank you, commissioners, for your attention this evening. We're happy to take questions.
Hearing no questions, I think.
Okay. Public comment?
Public comment?
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 2, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. We do have one in-person comment.
Okay.
Herb?
Good evening, Chair Scharf and members of the commission. Recently, in December and January, you had items before you, one, improving resiliency of the electric system and of upgrading substation connections to higher lighter load. And as I pointed out, one of them, well, they seem to be, one of them was in Meadow Circle, which would have been a site possibly for data centers, and it was also upgrading Colorado, and there were also ideas of things such as time of use for residential, and it was framed in the sense that it was doing something for the residential customers. But in fact, all of those changes were really capital costs that were needed for data centers. In other communities where have been data centers installed, there have been concerns about who's paying for the additional electric power. And in some cases, data centers provide their own power, so you don't have that problem. Then there's cooling. Times are air cooled, but now liquid cooled and water cooled, and where is that supply coming from? Also for backup of generators, it generally tends to, industry standard is diesel backup, which is a problem. And the data centers themselves create noise. And so there's this sense of, in other communities where people have taken the time and trouble to find out the impacts of placing data centers in town and determining who should pay for the increased cost of the electrical system. It seemed to be that there's essentially an effort to subsidize the data centers. And most of what you've seen in the report before you tonight indicates, well, how much more revenue you're going to be getting, the city's going to be getting from the data center being in Palo Alto, similar to the, I don't know how many now are in Santa Clara, 58 or 60 data centers. But in fact, if you actually allocate the costs properly, the data centers' costs are high. And for example, the fiber optic network, where the backbone would be serving them, most of that, those fiber strands are not for the fiber project. They're for such things as data centers. So as this goes forward, the public will become more informed of the subject when it comes to action items. And you may find that the rosy picture being given now may not be exactly what the community believes, and to the extent that it results in higher residential rates, the only thing that people have to vote on down the road is something else, which, as we know, are the Coverly money. And I don't know if one thing will lead them to upset about one thing will lead them to vote no on something else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public speakers?
No additional hands raised.
All right. That brings us to the commission. Any comments? Anyone want to start?
I'll start with a couple questions. One is that one of the attractions of Palo Alto is that it would be potentially greener. Is that in truth the case? Because if the electricity is going to come across the same grid, and so incremental load on the grid, as I understand it, is not any greener if it's situated in Palo Alto as somewhere else, notwithstanding our wonderful set of contracts, but just in terms of assuming they're going to build it somewhere in the vicinity. So that's one question.
All right, Lena Perkins, I'm happy to address that. I just think that we are committed to 100% carbon-free electric portfolio, which is not a commitment that anyone that locally has. Alameda has similar, so us and Alameda, we're roughly the same on that. But I think that there really is, what is your impact in terms of additionality of an additional megawatt here versus an additional megawatt elsewhere? That is going to be served by a carbon-free contract. And when you actually look, we have done hourly accounting since 2018. And because of our dispatchable hydro resources, we actually displace carbon in the dirtiest hours of the grid. And so whether on an average or a marginal basis, we're carbon-free or carbon negative in average hydro year.
So you're saying that if a 10 megawatt, 24/7 data center operation with flat load connects to Palo Alto and buys its energy from us versus Santa Clara, that there will be less carbon emissions in the world next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question there? How much additional load growth can you allow and still have that statement hold?
I mean, we're always signing new contracts.
Right.
Right, and so we have a commitment to an hourly summed across the year carbon neutral commitment. And so that is cleaner than I think any other utility in California. So, unless the council reverses that policy, that is what we're going to hold to. The question becomes costs for new contracts, and that's why we work really hard, and I think we have a track record to show for that.
So my next question is, Santa Clara has got an amazing number of amazing amount of data center load. I don't know if it's number of data centers or larger data centers. They also have substantially lower residential rates than we do. To what extent is there a causal link between those two? Can we say anything about, and Director Couture, maybe you have an opinion about this, given your experience at Santa Clara, to what extent is the fact that their residential rates are lower due to the fact that they have more of this type of load?
Yeah, so I will parrot a lot of the testimony that Director Nico Prokos gave at the Assembly hearing. Because they have these data centers, around 60 data centers that provide about, and commercial industrial, 85%, 90% of their load. So a lot of their infrastructure, their receiving stations, their substations, their subtransmission is funded by those ratepayers. So that brings an additional benefit to the city, not only in their rates, but also those community benefits associated with it. Like Palo Alto, they have a utilities tax. They also have a very robust practice of bringing and adding fees, associated development-related fees for data centers. As part of this presentation, we were mirroring some of the latest statements. So a 50-megawatt data center there, and their development fees, just specific to providing for their types of what I'll call grid modernization or doubling of the capacity, was $25 million. And that is in addition to site-specific requirements to serve their facility as well. So it pencils for them, but they do have different land uses than we do here in Palo Alto. Because of the sheer size, their land use is different. I've mentioned this before. They have a much larger percentage of commercial industrial area. A lot of those areas are under the flight path of the airport. So more than half of the city is commercial industrial and large. They have very large firms, used to have manufacturing. So they were kind of ready to take that next wave on of data center development, and then, positioned well with the local generation that they have on site.
No, I understand that they have tremendous advantages in the land use, land options, just it's cheaper there and there's much more potentially available.
In short, it does provide value for the residential customers. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, thank you. That's my two questions. I'll probably have a comment or two later. But
Good stuff.
Thank you for the presentation. I thought there was a lot of helpful background and really put together a lot of the considerations that we'll have to consider as a community as we look at the opportunities and the challenges for bringing in data centers to Palo Alto. My thinking, and I had written out a whole document on this, my thinking aligns with how staff has presented this. So I won't reiterate a lot of what you've already presented. I agree that we should be looking from the 5 to 50 megawatt scale. In Palo Alto, our load is basically 110 megawatts total. So adding a 100 megawatt data center sounds like a system shaping type of project, and I do worry about capital costs for that type of project. I'm generally supportive of adding data centers to Palo Alto, provided that we can ensure that it does not raise rates for residents and existing customers, and it's not disruptive to our community. And I'll give some examples of disruptions for our community that I'm concerned about. One that our member of our public brought forward is noise. Data centers can be noisy, so that's something we'll want to be careful about. And the other is, and this is something where we have an opportunity having both management of our water utility and our electric utility, is water use. And both consumption and water pressure issues, because data centers do suck in a lot of water. I've seen a video where there's a household next to an new Amazon data center, and they cannot get water pressure in their sinks, and their utility doesn't care. But luckily in Palo Alto, we're a municipal utility, we do care. We can make sure those types of situations don't happen. I agree that there can be a tremendous benefit to rate stabilization and bringing down rates in Palo Alto, especially because it seems like we have already the capacity, and we're planning a substantial grid mod project where we will have additional capacity on top of that. The Santa Clara point, I think, is pretty interesting. they have better rates than we do. They have better rates than PG&E, but they cannot serve every data center. The last I read is some of their projects are delayed through 2029, just because they have such a tremendous queue. And you see other Bay Area cities now trying to court these kinds of large facilities. Mayor Matt Mahan is now really trying to bring data centers into San Jose. I think we can do the same, maybe not the same large scale 100 megawatt data centers, but like was presented, the 5 to 25 to 50 megawatt data centers could be great opportunities. And it sounds like we have at least speculative interest in that, which I think is terrific. I agree with the differentiators that staff presented and the benefits that we have here in Palo Alto. And I think in terms of next steps, if you're looking for feedback on that, I'd love to see a more detailed kind of grid feasibility analysis, like where could these data centers go? What is the summary of the current interest? We saw that bar chart with some of the interest, but I'd love to hear how exactly we're recording these data centers and what our plan is. And also, what are our plans around making sure we have strict cost responsibility for new projects, making sure contracts have upfront funding, minimum consumption guarantees, and long-term agreements, and exit fees, just to protect our interests as these large projects come on. And I'll caveat all this with one more statement. I read a recent study showing that the compute necessary to get a certain amount of AI training done is having every 8 to 12 months at the current rate. And new technologies might reduce the necessary amount of compute. So we might actually see the energy demand not be as extreme as what's being forecasted here, but I do think there are really great reasons to court these customers as it stands. So thank you again for the presentation.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks from me as well for bringing this topic. I know we've asked for it for a while. So I also, in general, support Palo Alto being, a modern city and enabling some of our tech companies to have closer access to some of these data centers. I also have concerns about a couple things that I wanted to ask about. One, just to delve a little bit further into the power portfolio. We actually haven't seen that in a while. It was brought here in the 2023 IRP, but we haven't seen a lot of contracts, and we did hear about how competitive the bidding was for new solar plus storage. So one of my concerns is just if we need to go out and buy higher volumes of power to get the green power that we want, and especially since we rely so much on hydro, and like this year, it's not raining. And I know we have a lot of storage from prior years, but just thinking about years where the hydro adjuster might come in, can you talk a little bit about the power portfolio if we are forced to buy higher volumes than like our status quo, how that might affect prices? I don't know if we have any futurists out there, but thinking through that, and then in addition to the portfolio, just how the hydro rate adjuster would work for these clients. I guess that would come in a low hydro year, but how would that affect our prices as we, I guess, get more exposure to market?
Yeah, happy to speak about our portfolio. I think one thing is, as the graph showed, we have not been growing, until we had COVID downturn. 2021, we had some COVID rebound, and then we had data center growth on top of that. But our contracts that we signed, some of them are expiring anyway. So we are in the market anyway. And one thing is, it's actually very hard. We're competing with, beyond the Santa Claras of the world, currently we're competing with PG&E looking to replace all of Diablo Canyon right now, because that has to turn off in 2029 and 2030. So, there are some economies of scale out there. We have existing relationships. We have extremely high credit, so we have some competitive advantages. So I don't know. we can come back to you with further details on how this would impact supply rates. But, in general, we're growing without data centers, right? They're projected to be about 50% of our growth, and our contracts are expiring anyway. So we are in the markets, and about half of the costs are on the distribution system, right? Half of the costs that go to ratepayers. And, I think that, so while it is a very competitive market out there, and now we have tariffs and we have many delays and a lot of competition, I think the governor is extremely focused on cutting green tape, and so hopefully we'll see some relief there. Also, I know the legislature is really considering extending Diablo Canyon, which will also take a lot of pressure off of the California market, as well as the expanded day-ahead market, where we're looking to purchase, it should stabilize electricity overall. So what you're requesting takes more thorough analysis, but I don't think that this would necessarily be a huge game changer.
Okay, do we as a city just have a view on what the future prices of these power purchase agreements will be? Like, are they ticking up as a certain percent that we can talk about?
Yeah, currently we're seeing basically a price premium of about $15 per megawatt hour for a long-term renewable contract versus what you can sell it for right now. And so that's kind of this upward price pressure for long-term contracts. And it's from Diablo Canyon, it's from many of the other utilities are behind their RPS goals, so they have not procured renewables, and so they're facing penalties and reputational damage. So there's a lag right now, and then the tariffs are huge.
Yeah, so, we are heavily in the market. We actually procure with Northern California Power Agency. They recently went out with another RFP looking for solar and storage. So we're always in the market for new renewables and new contracts. As you know, the renewable portfolio standard is going up in the next several years, 52% end of 2027 and 60% by 2030. So yes, we are on the market to do that. We are well positioned with NCPA to do it as a consortium. And, while we provided the information on Santa Clara at the behest of the commission, they're our partner in many of these projects, so we're able to leverage their need as well to get some better pricing. So I think we don't want to speculate too much on something that's a very competitive product right now, but yes, we are definitely in the market, and Palo Alto has a track record of meeting those community expectations to meet those renewable goals.
Yeah, I guess I just worry about future rates because there's so much in the air about the data centers just causing demand to go up. Okay, so I have another question about rates, which is, do our current rate structures fairly compensate us for would they fit within our existing rate structures, or do we need to develop new rate structures for these types of customers?
Our current rate structures are based on a COSA for electric. If we had something, in the 25 megawatt scale, we could think of, or potentially around there, we could think of a new rate structure that, or additional capacity reservations to make sure that the load that we're building out for actually shows up, or take or pay contracts. And so that's, when we have that kind of financial exposure, we could think of different constructs, but yeah, I'll leave it at there.
Okay, but I guess I didn't go back and look at our rates, but they would accommodate a customer like that in the large, okay. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask about water. I'm not really sure, I don't understand how the water is used, what happens to the water after it's used. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Do they have an obligation to have it be sanitized and return it to groundwater? What happens to the water?
So there's an interesting relationship with data centers and energy and water. So you use more water, you use less energy, you use more energy, you need less water. So I see Vice Chair Motter nodding in approval. So a lot of the data centers that are in the area, they do not wish to use potable water as part of their own customer base and their own corporate goals. So we see a lot of recirculating systems where they use potable and they recirculate it. So there's not a huge amount of discharge and that you would see normally from like a cooling tower. To the extent that recycled water is available, then yes, data centers would like to use recycled water. So as you may recall, we have a wastewater treatment plant with many members. It's treated tertiary levels, similar levels that Santa Clara has for its customers, the similar levels that we use for the geothermal plants that NCPA has, that tertiary water is used for the Lodi Energy Center that NCPA is also a member of. So that is that standard. And so if customers did want to come to Palo Alto, there's locations where recycled water would be available.
Great, that's helpful to me. So I guess my input would be that I would seek out, if we were to consider data centers, my preference would be to stay on the smaller side so that we didn't have like massive projects. I'd rather have more of the smaller. I think in the written report, it sounded like we were more aimed towards smaller, and then in this slide deck, it looks like we're more open to larger. But I'd say, just based on what I read and what I understand to date, I guess my personal preference would be to go for multiple smaller data centers that fit within our existing kind of customer class. I would want to make sure that they use non-potable water. I would not want them to be taking our beautiful Hetch Hetchy water, and I hope they're not in the Bay Area, in that service area, using it for that use. And then my other inputs are just, I don't know if there's any issues around contamination. I'm certainly concerned about noise, any kind of contamination, chemical contamination, and then also just concern about, this might be a non-topic, but night sky light, just being concerned about not creating a lot of new industrialized companies in the area. So having rules about those things would be my preference.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk. Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation, and I did see Dr. Perkins' presentation from July, which happened to come up in review on the same topic. I think my main thought is that the issue is not data competitiveness, but data center competitiveness, but whether these are what is beneficial and wise for the CPAU and for the city of Palo Alto. And I sort of had a concern that some of the presentation was kind of promotional more than analytical, that it talked a lot about revenue, didn't talk too much about cost. So I think as we go forward, we need to address that. Also, just the comment that Commissioner Gupta made about increased efficiency. That kind of discussion has been going on for about almost 300 years. Jevons paradox, when steam engines were initially developed to pump water out of coal mines, it was thought that, wow, now we won't need to use coal hardly anymore because it'll be so efficient. Well, it kind of boomeranged and worked the other way around. It doesn't always have to, but often does. So I don't think we can count on reduce computing power anytime soon. But I did want to address the stated goal in the packet, which is discuss general guiding principles for the integration of new data centers. And I just want to suggest 4 kind of what principles and 4 how principles. The what principles, which has already been stated, is not increase the cost of electricity to existing ratepayers. I think there's a risk. And we talked a lot about distribution system costs and substations and so on. But I think if CPAU and all the other California load-serving entities all need to deliver more electricity due to electrification, due to data centers, There'll be more competition for increase the cost of generation and transmission, which has not been addressed in here. And I think it's really important that we do that. So in addition to whatever happens to our distribution costs, I think another risk is that if CPAU makes long-term investment and pays for it out of current revenue, that instantly raises rates, at least short-term. Alternatively, if we borrow to pay for a long-term investment and the load disappears, we have a stranded asset and the debt. So I think it's really important to address that. And you have talked about that somewhat in terms of take-or-pay contracts, though I would say that different sort of rate structures do not address this problem. Having a demand charge does not address stranded asset problem. So I think the second thing is not harm existing retail, commercial, or industrial businesses. I think that's an important thing. I do agree with the main point that we want to, be on the forefront, on the frontier of the future and so on, but not at the expense of everybody else. I think the third thing is not impair our ability to deliver electricity or the reliability and resilience of the electricity supply. And I think increasing our delivery of electricity by numbers like 20, 30, even 50% really is what one of these charts shows over the next 10 years creates some risk of impairing resilience. And I think fourth, not impair our ability to deliver renewable electricity and not increase the cost to do so. I think the risk is if data centers want to locate here to capture our carbon neutrality, we'll have to increase energy, renewable energy purchases to meet our increased kilowatt hour purchases, right? Even if the percent RPS renewable target that we have stays the same, the number of kilowatt hours goes up. So we have to find those. And in an era where the federal incentives have been removed and everybody else is trying to buy the same energy, I think it's sort of obvious there's a high risk that the cost of that energy goes up. Also, I think there's an issue around really what we mean by carbon neutrality. When we say we have negative carbon at certain hours, I think most people would think that means that we're taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. We're not. So I think we need to be a little careful about what we say we're doing. I'd also like to suggest 4 how principles. I think number one is most important, move beyond the CPAU distribution system analysis. I think we need to consider the entire process, generation, transmission, distribution. And we also need to consider the whole ecosystem, at least within the state of California, where everybody else is perhaps trying to do the same thing. Everybody's going to face this challenge. We need to be thinking about it in a holistic way. The second how is conduct in-depth analyses. I have seen some academic literature on this where people are starting to develop models for analyzing this kind of problem. I don't see that here. I think we really need to do it. Also, probably need to do it working. You folks mentioned NCPA, CEC, CalISO, all those, the obvious organizations to get up to speed on the academic literature, work with those groups, look at the models that have been used. I'd be happy to point to a few folks I've worked with that are doing it. I think the third thing, and you kind of are getting at this, but I'd like to make it more broad, which is applying a hedging principle to analyses, rates, and buy-ins, which means the duration of a payment has to match the duration of a commitment. We can't be going out. And I think where this applies is, I would say anything that's, say, more than 5% of our load is a big number. And a loss of a load of that scale would be a huge problem for us. So, you can argue whether it's 5% or 7%, but it's definitely not much below that. And then the fourth thing is, how to prioritize, the question was how to prioritize recruitment of data centers. I think the basic idea would be to set a threshold size, which I'm suggesting 5%, maybe it's a little smaller, and in terms of, peak kilowatt hours, annual kilowatt hours, peak kilowatts, annual kilowatt hours, other factors we can agree on, and then do all the above, what I've just described. And I think then it'd be clear what we want to promote, what we don't want to promote just by doing the math. So anyway, thank you very much for the presentation.
So I'm kind of struggling a little bit with what we can go beyond pointers to staff. I mean, so there's the question of data center's good or data center's bad. I mean, I think with the sense I get is up to say 25, 50 megawatts, it's probably good. And by good, meaning something that could reduce residential rates, which is top of mind for me. I mean, everything else is interesting, but it's, to me, it's all second. And is this a way where we had discussions at previous meetings to potentially ameliorate what is being built into our long-term plans, which are 6% electricity rises next year and the year after, and I think 8% from then on. I haven't seen many things that have the potential to dampen those rate rises. This is one of the few things that I think could. So other than just kind of giving general pointers, which I personally don't think would be much use, the question is, do we need to do something, you know, at the council level? I mean, some of the recommendations you have here are, and people have talked about things like noise and dark skies. That's not in our purview. I mean, there are regulations about noise and dark skies that are you know, being and have been adopted and are going in front of the council and go through different commissions, you know, required setbacks, architectural standards, et cetera. We have nothing to say about that. Again, there's other commissions that's in their purview. Do we want something, a message to council that says, hey, this is an opportunity such that we should get together the zoning restrictions on where they could, you know, where they could be located? You know, it's not us to have an opinion on that because it's based on things that are beyond the purview of this commission. You know, the question is, to me, is this enough of an opportunity to lower residential rates or, you know, moderate the raise in residential rates that, you know, we should recommend something to council that says, hey, there should be an active initiative here. Let's, you know, let's talk to PTC, you know, and let's try to make this a little more streamlined than it probably currently is. I don't know how streamlined it is. I guess, you know, that's part of it. The second part is, and I think, you know, Herb Borak brought it up, other people have mentioned, data centers are getting bad press right now. So there's kind of a generic, you know, when I look at what comes across, you know, my interest groups on data centers, it's, you know, anecdotes like the person who, you know, didn't have the water, or they're using so much electricity, or it's this giant noisy thing. So there needs to be, if we do this, if we go big on it, or we try to attract them in a way that it, you know, goes beyond just saying, hey, here's a phone number, call us if you want to build a data center. You know, I think we need to get in front and address the public perception as well, because the public perception is, oh, that we don't want data centers, and two, they increase rates. So why do we want to subsidize, you know, billionaires, which is not a popular topic among many people probably in Palo Alto at the moment. So I guess my question, both to staff and to my fellow commission members, is, you know, beyond just kind of giving, you know, direction, is this something we want to potentially go bigger on or not?
Well, I think a couple things I have to say. I agree with Bob. I think the public perception, it's interesting how wrong the press is, at least in our town, given how data centers work. And I think getting that message out is probably useful if we do that. I'm a little unclear as to what stage you would be in. Like, I think we've heard mostly positive in terms of let's go forth and see if we can get data centers. And I agree with Commissioner Phillips that, you know, my interest is lowering and stabilizing residential rates so we don't get the 6 to 8% every year. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons to do that. We want to electrify, we want people to move away from gas. You know, if electricity becomes really expensive, it's less comfortable to do that, shall we say. So all of that, I think, is green. I totally buy the whole notion of us, if data centers come here, we are displacing carbon off the grid as opposed to go to Santa Clara or somewhere else. So I think we can feel good about that. I haven't seen anything that says, that we shouldn't do this. I think everyone agrees, the 25. I do think if somebody came and said to you, we want to put a 50 megawatt in here, the question is, how much money are you going to pay us? How are you going to subsidize the city, basically? What are you putting up? That kind of stuff. And I think I got that out of your presentation, that you're well aware, and that's what Santa Clara does. I mean, those were some eye-popping numbers. I'm sure with our budget deficit, I sort of heard about another $25 million would be a real positive. So I thought there was a lot of that kind of stuff. I did have some in-the-weeds questions. When we were in Sacramento, it was fairly clear to me that every legislator said, we are going to extend Diablo Canyon. The question was, when are they going to extend Diablo Canyon? I heard everything from, we probably will do it last minute, or we may do it in the next couple of years. And I guess the question, if it's baked into the market right now that people are paying higher, because will the market prices suddenly fall then when they do it? Like 28 comes and people have purchased all this high-priced power, and Diablo Canyon is going to stay on there, so suddenly there's all this stuff we can buy. So I don't know what you thought about that, what you think the curve will look like, assuming it gets done later in the years, like 28, 27, 29.
Yeah, and, Director Curatori was there with us as well, but State Senator Petrie Norris is interested in running a number of good studies in the legislature this year, it's an odd place because the legislature is not full of analysts necessarily, it's not a regulatory body, but, to identify if Diablo Canyon is the cheapest form of carbon-free and to see if it's needed for reliability. And so that's going to take probably a year. And so then for them to act on that information, I'd be surprised if it were to happen within 18 months. And you're right that anything we sign now is locked in, and we will not, if there are savings later and they act in 28 or 29, we will be locked into higher prices. It is priced into the market now, and PG&E has been directed to try to fill that hole in their portfolio. So they're outpricing us on everything.
So what I'm hearing, Lo, is we're interested in going ahead and looking at getting data centers. So what is staff's take on that? Is it that you're actively out there looking to bring in data centers, or people are approaching us and you're like, yeah, let's go forward with a 10 megawatt because you've approached us? Are we out there actively seeking, or are we not? And then the second part of my question on that is, if we get at someone who's interested in building a data center and they, do all this pay stuff, when we secure the load, doesn't it take at least 18 months or whatever from now, or 2 years from now? So that gets closer to when hopefully they reauthorize Diablo Canyon. So the price, I could see the timing working out really well for us. As the prices drop, we secure the data centers.
Director Curatori, do you want to speak to the CUP as a proactive?
Yeah, so let me just talk a little about, so one of your questions, on, are we actively seeking out a data center? So, we are an electric utility based on the services to the community and the customers. So yes, we are approached. To the extent that they do want to come to Palo Alto, there is a timing constraint on their side as well. They have to purchase the property. They have to look at financing and funding. There's a construction side on their end as well. And we're very aware, frankly, I'm very aware of what those economics and timing looks like. We also have the benefit of a new second transmission line coming in here, not only going to provide us reliability, but some additional capacity as well that just comes with it because it's a separate corridor. I think the value and benefit of that in coming sooner is because it's on an existing PG&E transmission system. So the line is there, they're going to reconductor. That is different from other areas where they're building new 230 kV lines going through Alameda County and coming down to Santa Clara County, or coming from Metcalf Energy Center and running through San Jose. Those take a longer construction period by its very nature because we have an existing line. So that said, we have probably are in a unique space in able to address customers that are interested coming here. And frankly, we have the playbook. So we understand what that needs, and we understand that they understand that they're going to be willing to pay their fair share not more than their fair share, but their fair share to connect. So when I was mentioning the 25 million for 50 megawatts, that is to ensure that on the electric utility side, those funds are coming into the utility. That's the cost and calculations in Santa Clara. In terms of the infrastructure, we would make our own cost estimate and system impact study to make sure that those funds and capital costs to fund those expansion projects are coming in early, not coming in over time, right? So that's an additional protection. Other areas, they also require data centers to procure their own renewable credits to maybe green the services provided. They don't have to do that here. That's the value and benefit that we can bring as well. So there's a lot of opportunities, here as well. As Commissioner Gupta mentioned, there is a queue in Santa Clara because of their very expansive growth. And what we've seen in other areas of the country is there's the primary market, and as, Virginia and Loudoun County reaches a certain capacity, it kind of goes out to the neighboring communities. Silicon Valley in this Bay Area is a primary, and then there's secondary markets throughout the country. So if you look at, we are in contact with, City of Burbank, who has an electric utility. They are in one of those secondary markets as well, and we have contacts throughout the state. So just going back to it, we do have that ability to take in whatever customer wants to talk to us, and then go through the necessary steps. Some customers, we have capacity right now, the smaller ones that we were talking about, because data centers come in all sizes. They're not dedicated to large boxes. They could be a part of a corporate campus where they need to have low latency. They need to be close to their data. They are running, maybe some mobility solutions that we often see here in Palo Alto. We're ready to connect those types of customers.
Thank you again for your presentation and the helpful questions of my fellow commissioners. They captured many of my initial questions and points that I wanted to make. I do think that, it's worth reiterating the need to build projections about what load growth would look like, how that sequences with the cost of NCPA contracts. We actually have some real visibility into that. And so doing that exercise, I think, is something that would be really valuable in a follow-up agenda item, so that we understand, what is the baseline impact on customer rates going to be regardless of whether we see large load growth. How much load growth do we expect to see natively because of electrification of vehicles and homes? And then as we layer kind of on top of that, what are the marginal costs of these contracts likely to be, right? Without that information, it's really hard to have this discussion at all. I think that it's, also a little bit difficult to have this conversation in the absence of a discussion about water resources, and frankly, the capacity of our non-potable system to provide cooling water. If we're looking for data centers to use that non-potable system, clearly we're anticipating rate reductions because you're better using your fixed capital infrastructure, and there's a pass-through commodity cost, right? That's true on the power side. That's also true on the water side. I'm imagining we have a vastly underused non-potable water system, although I don't think we've ever seen data on that as a commission. Who are the users? To what extent is there, I know actually nothing about Palo Alto's non-potable use system. So better data on that, and how we allocate fixed and marginal costs there, I think is really important. I think it's also valuable to think about that, of course, in terms of upgrades that are expected at the wastewater utility. That non-potable tertiary treatment is going to need a lot of upgrade pretty soon, just to comply with nitrogen discharge limits. So it's worth thinking about that as another mechanism or lever for rate reductions on the water side, but we need to be really clear about both communicating that as a resource, and also doing the equivalent and very requisite analysis on utilization factors and siting. I think that it's valuable, there's lots of valuable discussion about flat loads from data centers. It's definitely some data centers have very flat loads, and other data centers really don't have flat loads. So I think it is actually, I don't have a great understanding of load shapes as a function of load size. And it would be helpful to get that data so that as you're doing that kind of step zero, which is what are your forecasts, that we have some sense of load shape. I think it's also really useful, to think about whether flat is what we want. In fact, I think we might want a non-steady state load. We just don't want them to consume power between 4 and 9 p.m., right? And to the extent that we can prioritize interconnection, if there is a queue, we should absolutely be prioritizing internet connection on a set of flexible load, or at least willingness to shed load during, emergency events. So building that into, it's hard to build that into a COSA necessarily, or develop a new rate, because we do need to be fair to all customers. But certainly there are other levers we have that are not just rate-based levers to help reduce costs for everybody. And flexible load operation of data centers is absolutely one of the mechanisms that PG&E is considering in how they are queuing customers for new interconnections. And I think it would be worth us building that in as well. Obviously, our resource portfolio looks different than PG&E's, and so we need to think about that as part of our projection. But absolutely, this lever of interconnection queue, I think, is an important one. I guess I want to say one other thing about an interconnection queue. I definitely think that we have an existing set of customers here that need to stay competitive. And staying competitive commercial entities or any, I'm not even going to specify what kind of customers, right? But we have customers here today that need to stay competitive. And we want to keep Palo Alto businesses and commercial entities competitive. I don't know the extent to which prioritizing interconnections for existing customers is legally allowed, but ensuring that we are helping existing customers to service load growth with, associated with reasonably sized data centers, that seems incredibly important above necessarily servicing some new entity that's coming in. As you said, the low latency component is valuable to our businesses, and I just want to make sure that there's some discussion about interconnection queues should one arise.
Anybody else? Chris hasn't spoken. Let's go with Chris.
Well, I also wasn't here, so it's kind of shameless to do this. I apologize for being late. I told several of you I would be. And I want to approach this pretty carefully, having not seen the presentation. But the package that I read, I come at this, Alan, as you know, and I put it in email today, with a concern that I don't understand what kind of company, what kind of customer wants to put what kind of data center in Palo Alto. We're the heart of Silicon Valley, but that doesn't mean people want to put their data center in Palo Alto. We have cheap energy compared to Redwood City and other PG&E places for residential, but that doesn't mean we're cheap compared to putting it in Oregon or Texas, where it's, 5, 6, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. So I have been yearning to hear from staff, what do we know from our customers? Do we talk to our customers about this? How many customers do we even have? So question, point blank, how many data center customers with 10 megawatts or more do we have today? Roughly 5, 50?
Yeah, we have one about 10 megawatts.
We have one in the 10 megawatt plus area. The one that's well publicized, of course, is Tesla. And so in the package, in the staff report, there's references to having, made best practices with, getting customer funding and all of that. But I couldn't help but wonder, are we just talking about an N of one customer that we have best practices with, or are there dozens of them? And the answer, I think, is one. So, I come at this from a more corporate for-profit background, but, we have used a load projection chart. For example, when we did the best trolley, the 50 megawatt deal back in the summer, a chart went around. It was really a fundamental, important chart in the whole analysis and the briefing material. I think it might have even made the newspaper, but it showed our load projections through 2045. And I have to kind of eyeball this, but roughly in 2023, so 2 years ago, our load from data centers was effectively zero. And suddenly, over a 2 or 3 year period, I'm looking at the chart, but I can't really show it to you. I think you know it. In a 2 or 3 year period, data center load goes from almost zero to about 160, I'm eyeballing it, 160 megawatts. Our overall load is around 1,000 kilowatt hours a year. And it's like, it goes to 200. How did it get there? What's it comprised of? Can I double click on that bar and understand how many customers are in there? The funny thing is, though, that from 2025, 2035, 2045, that orange bar stays roughly at 160, 180 megawatts. It doesn't grow. So it's not like this is some dynamic forecast projection that we have. And I'd love to understand what our marketing, our customer relations, or our customer, data gathering process in this category looks like. Because again, my question coming in is, I know we have lots of tech companies as customers, but I don't understand why they put a big data center here. Now, Alan, you made a couple of allusions earlier I picked up on, like mobility. So Tesla, of course, is automated driving and that sort of data. You said there's some examples where the R&D teams need low latency. They need on-premise data centers. I don't understand this very well, but my question to you is, how do we understand the specific customer requirements in this category? Light off.
I think your questions are well taken. And as Director Curatori and COO Crowley mentioned, we've seen a number of inquiries. I will also say that the chart you're referring to with load growth, that is known data centers, and we're pretty conservative. And we are working, we're working with the CEC and actually advising them, since a single developer will shop all the utilities across the state, and so helping the CEC to scope their statewide projections to make sure those are not overstated. And with respect to why a big data center here, I just would say that we are not in the game when it comes to big data centers. The average size of a new data center in the US is 500 megawatts. So even Santa Clara is not in that game. And so these are little by new data center standards, and they're here because they need that low latency right next to end users or right next to researchers. So they need to be right there. They need to rapidly iterate, and they also may have IP concerns. So they may want to host their own data centers rather than going to a hyperscaler that's a different company.
So that's the other way they think about it, and we use the data center term just as a standard protocol, but it's also lab space, right? So they may be looking at lab space. So they may be looking where their staff is doing things trial and error and having close, because we are this research area. It's a Stanford Research Park, right? So that is true to fact. So that's the customer classes that we're trying to see, and that's where I think Palo Alto has its niche. I mean, Palo Alto has like PAX right next to us, literally a block away. which is, one of the major starts of the internet. And there are a lot of customers that want to be in this space. And our unique position next to Stanford in the Bay Area, where a lot of the brain trust is, that's where they see it. You're absolutely right. We're not going to be hosting 500 megawatt data centers here in Palo Alto. That doesn't fit our community, our land use. Those large data centers are actually co-locating next to large power facilities or building their own throughout the United States. So I want to get us back to what, Palo Alto can do to be that electric utility, can do to, provide that power to the customers and that community. I mean, it ties back to the economic vibrancy that the council has made for one of their goals. We are very keen about making sure those are community benefits. We highlighted some of those, in terms of revenue generation that goes to the general fund, taking a page from, our neighboring POU. And affordability is top on mind. So, while these are very highlighted type of presentations, there's a lot of work that went in the background to say, if these facilities, if these high-tech corporations weren't here, what would that do directly onto rates? And that's just for their energy use, right? We're just looking at the energy use. We're not looking at the head count, right? And the brain trust that's here, generating more value to Silicon Valley in general, but Palo Alto specifically. So points very well taken. I think what staff is here is tried to show the balance. We wanted to show this commission what the values and benefits could be, using a case study of another local POU. But we are looking also at what that interconnection looks like. PG&E is coming out, I think it's Rule 30. It's been brought to the CPUC in terms of, their interconnection. What does that mean for us? What do those rates look like? So we do have our finger on the pulse in tracking that, and we can do that internally with staff. But, we're also leveraging kind of our partnerships around. Hard to summarize data centers in general, but we are well positioned for what Palo Alto does best in serving the community as it's currently kind of laid out. We have areas where data centers can come. We've highlighted that in the presentation in the commercial industrial areas. We see that around potentially Highway 101, potentially in Stanford Research Park, tied to these high-tech corporate headquarters and engineering headquarters. So, and trying to show and communicate that what we've seen in our numbers and what we've seen in our rates is it provides a benefit. Not saying that newer ones, it is cautionary. You look across the United States in areas in Virginia and others where there are more challenges, so it's not an easy discussion, and appreciate, the cautionary look by this commission, but also, we're also trying to show that there are balances having, business and to continuing supporting business. And we've served larger loads in the past.
My last question on this tonight would be, do we have a list of 30, 50 of our current commercial customers, even a CRM system, where on this topic, we're going out and doing market research to ask them whether they are good prospects for data centers here. Have we talked to 30, 50 of our customers, or 30, 50 of people who aren't in Palo Alto yet but might want to come? I just don't have any sense for whether there's a salesperson or a marketing team that's actively doing that and focused on this question. Is there?
Well, there's a couple ways. As we mentioned earlier, that, if customers know who we are as a utility, and they can reach out to our engineering team. We also have key account reps that work with our larger customers, so we have a single point of contact for them. That's not uncommon in the industry as well. So if there was a reach out by a corporation or a business, we certainly can take that. We also send our staff to business and other events. As you know, Palo Alto also has an economic development manager. We communicate with our city manager's office. So, I mean, we are fielding those requests coming in. So it's not like we're not actively engaged. And, that's part of the conversation here is on our dedicated data center competitiveness. Is there other things that you would like to recommend as part of the UAC in terms of, thoughts or suggestions to city council as an advisory group?
My number one piece of advice would be to start some kind of initiative like that. Have a person whose job it is over some period of time to go out and canvass the market, starting with our one customer. I'm not sure Tesla's the super talkative customer, but anyway, starting with our one customer, and then our 5, 10, 50 in Palo Alto prospects, and even go outside Palo Alto to understand customer demand. That'd be my number one recommendation.
You're illuminated.
Pardon? Did you want to speak?
Yes. Sorry. I agree with that comment that we need to know what the market demand is. I just to level set, 25 megawatt data center may be small in the hyper space, but for a utility with 100-ish megawatt average load, it's big. It's not incremental load that you just plug in somewhere and everybody's happy. So I think there's a technical thing to address. But I think the main thing is we've seen, as Director Curatori talked about, the promise and the potential benefits and the revenue and so on. And we've seen case studies of where this is going forward in a positive way. But I think for us to do our job in terms of advising city council, we need to see more quantitative analysis of the benefits and costs, like as Vice Chair Mutter talked about, what's the load going forward with and without, and especially, in my mind, especially what are the costs? Because I can see a lot of reasons why costs would be much higher, that marginal costs would be much higher than our average cost, and I can't see many reasons why they would be lower. So I'm concerned that would have a negative impact on all our customers. Anyway, that would be great to be wrong about, but then that we need to look through the telescope and do the analysis.
Yeah, and I just did want to address both Vice Chair Motter's comment in that, we have done analysis on, a number of our larger data centers, and we have seen them running very flat, high utilization of their fixed assets. And so, I think what the report and the presentation outline is that there's a number of protective measures that we can take contractually, whether it be take or pay contracts, whether it be, they bring their own renewable contract, the developer's fee for any grid expansions, and so that the risks are largely mitigatable, whether it's supply side, distribution system, and elsewhere, and that we actually, because we're kind of 3 to 4 years into this data center surge, we have those best practices now.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Then, with that said, then I think we should be able to see what the costs are. I mean, particularly starting with the generation side, which has not been addressed here at all. And to me, that we talk about at many meetings how much the cost of transformers and copper and everything else has gone up tremendously. So I don't know how we can have that kind of conversation on the one hand, and the other hand say that somehow this energy is going to be cheaper going forward. It doesn't make sense. I hope that's true, but I doubt it, and it just doesn't ring true to me. But anyway, the whole point is just doing a detailed analysis to figure out how the math works out.
So understand the desire on that kind of what if scenario. I think flatly we'd have to wait for the customer to know where they're going to be. It's very site specific. We can pull up information on what it costs to build a substation, dedicated substation. We know the timelines of these. I think what I'm hearing from the group is that the need to know and to ensure that, bottom line, that the community is protected, that the data center is coming in and can be competitive here. or, some foundational type of needs. The details on how we go through that, I don't see the utility going through that large-based analysis, until we have an understanding of, outreach to our customers and what they're looking for, right? Because the landscape does change, costs do change, when they're coming in, when they want to connect, what values they're bringing, where there's a myriad of those pieces. And when we get to that point, we have information that we can share with those customers on how we can get them connected. So I definitely hear the perspective in ensuring that, and absolutely, eyes wide open into how we work with our customers, especially large loads. But really, we need to have that dialogue with them first to have that agreement. For example, that large customer that has been mentioned, we worked through that process very quickly. It was a value and benefit for the customer, so they can grow in the period of time they wanted to. We had protections in place for the utility and the city. It's been a net positive. So it's not like we don't have a track record. We also know what those agreements look like at other agencies. And we can run very similar analysis. So I think that's where we're at, is that, when a customer comes, we're ready.
If I could just add.
We have a chart on page 14 that shows a load growth, peak load growth from 2025 to 2035. That's about 60 or 70 megawatts, maybe as high as 80 or plus megawatts. And it seems like we need to know what those megawatt hours under there cost, right? I don't see how we can go forward without knowing that. How can we write a contract with a customer without knowing what we're going to pay for the energy? And I don't see how we can make a recommendation to city council, this is a good idea or a bad idea, without having at least a swag at, both what the demand side and the supply side, both technically and economically.
Yeah, I will just say that we don't have control whether AI consumes electricity, and the fact that that these data centers are going in California, in other locations, is driving up our transmission rates, but we're not getting the revenue. So there is a cost to not getting a pro rata share of that load. And I will also say that when it comes to energy supply, you're really looking at the delta that you're paying for price certainty, because when it comes to a month prior, a day prior, an hour prior, you're selling it into the market, so that you're not committed to the full. If you pay $50 per megawatt hour for a contract, your delta and your exposure, it might be $5 that you paid as a price premium for that. So we are not getting take or pay contracts, but we could pass a take or pay contract to a data center and say, hey, you have a demand minimum or a capacity reservation that says you pay for 5 years, whether you show up or not. And then their incentives are aligned with our incentives.
Right, and that's fine. I'm just trying to understand quantitatively what all those numbers are that you just described.
Palo Alto is a significant part of the economic vitality of the Bay Area, but we're not a large user. And when we talk about California transmission as a whole, I don't want us to make this a bigger discussion than maybe is warranted, because there's a lot of folks here who would love to have that conversation. I'm not sure that's probably the best use, just looking at our local type of communications.
Okay. I thought you had something to say. Say it.
You mentioned that sometimes data centers come in with their own contracts, their own generation contracts. That's an interesting concept. I wasn't familiar with that, but I think that it would be helpful to understand, the degree to which that's a lever that you can tap. I think the point that Commissioner Metz is making more broadly is we have a lot of low-cost base load. We have hydro, right? And the minute you start to spread that low-cost base load against a much larger load, that low-cost base load, there's less of it to consume, right? Where I think we all have a hard time calibrating is, okay, so how important is that low-cost base load in ensuring low rates relative to the cost that we're paying in transmission, in our local distribution system, et cetera? And I just think like without some simple model, like that looks at, here's our low-cost base load and here's the marginal cost, like we just can't say anything, right? And I guess the final point I'd say is like, can you just, it makes a lot of sense to me to charge marginal rates for marginal increases, right? If you are adding huge new loads to a grid, pay the marginal rate. I think actually that is the fair way of doing it. I think what I've heard from actual data center and hyperscaler folks is like they're more than willing to do that. Although I don't know that we have an existing rate structure that allows that.
No, and that's well taken. And just context-wise, I do think the costs are about half for the distribution system and half for the supply. So if you think about spreading the cost of that distribution system, existing distribution system, and then they're paying for whatever additional, they really are, they're lowering the costs on the
But when you say distribution, you mean transmission plus distribution?
No, I mean within city.
Within city, right. So frankly, the generation is what, like a quarter then, okay? So I think we're not calibrated well there to have this discussion, and that's where a simple model would be super helpful.
I mean, you must have done this kind of modeling to do the estimate of the 5% reduction. The rates are 5% lower because of the existence of a data center. Just seeing that calculation, might help calibrate us, because I think what I'm hearing is people are not, to me, it seems fairly obvious that if we could get at least a certain amount of flat load, or as Vice Chair Mauder said.
Flat dispatchable load.
Even,
right, non-peak
even then,
load.
if we could get non-peak load, that's even better.
That's what I mean.
But if we can get pure flat, that's good. If we could get that, that's even better. And I can't see, it's hard for me to see the arguments against it, and at least until we get to some level. So, but maybe seeing that kind of analysis that you did to say the 5% reduction due to the data center would suffice.
Good stuff, quick?
Yeah, quick comment is, I agree with making sure we have a model and that we are mitigating any concerns as data centers come in. But I also think this is a competitive landscape, and this can be very beneficial for Palo Alto as long as we can mitigate those concerns. So I do want to, at least myself, and I think other commissioners too, do want to make sure we are making ourselves attractive to bringing data centers to Palo Alto, and supportive of staff. I am at least supportive of staff's efforts to make it attractive for them to come in, whatever that ends up looking like, if that's outreach, if that's making clear guidelines so they know what to expect at certain tiers. 5 megawatts might be a different guideline versus 25 megawatts, but I do think I am supportive of efforts to go out and market ourselves and make sure, as a secondary market, we're bringing in data centers to Palo Alto.
So I just wanted to say, I hope this has been helpful. I think the overwhelming message is mitigate the risks, find us some data centers. It seems helpful, So I don't know what the next steps of the utility is, what you're planning on doing with this. Are you going to go out and find data centers? Are you going to come back to us with like a plan to find data centers? Are you going to council? Like, what are you guys going to do?
So, part of the research that we had in here, we actually put into the presentation is ensuring that we have some known expectations and attractiveness to come to Palo Alto. And, some of the lessons learned and what we're heard from the commission here is making sure it kind of matches the feel of the community, some of the concerns about noise, some of the concerns about aesthetics, some of the concerns. And we have seen some agencies put through conditional use permits, so there might be some internal discussions we have with other departments to ensure that there's some certainty for data centers can come in. And then there's some normal outreach that we can do through our account reps, right, that work with our large customers. I think, frankly, discussing this and knowing that we have capacity and, that word will get out. There's also just this landscape, right? As Commissioner Gupta was mentioning, there is a large interest, not only in Santa Clara and San Jose and the rest of the PG&E service territory, knowing that we have capacity, knowing that, we're having a second transmission line coming here, knowing that we have that. I think one of the challenges that we have in Palo Alto is that we're relatively small, right, into that scheme. The land prices are what they are, and we don't have a lot of large parcels, vacant parcels. We're very successfully economically, so really trying to kind of lean into those services that we can provide. We didn't even mention that we have a dark fiber network, very similar to others, right? So we can connect those customers very quickly to PACS. Those are one of the values and benefits that we can bring, to be very nimble, and knowing that, we're making those investments on our side for other reasons, and they can come in Palo Alto and partner and pay their share to upgrade those systems as well and give those benefits.
Okay. With that, I think we're on to the next item. Thank you very much. Only 3 minutes on.
Okay, well, this is Catherine Elvert, our Utilities Communication Manager. We'll be talking about our residential electric and water utility customer satisfaction survey. Just to tee it off, this work is an oversampling, which we partner with California Municipals Utility Association, excuse me. So it's a sampling that goes throughout the state. We're able to get information from them, kind of leverage that, and so we can get some more information from our customers. And I will pass it over to Catherine.
Thank you, Director Curatori. Good evening, Commissioners. It's nice to see you again. I will go ahead and ask Kaylee to advance the slide for me first to our first slide. Okay, as Director Curatori mentioned, this survey is in partnership with the California Municipal Utilities Association. Great Blue Research is the contractor who administered the survey. And so the way that these operate is we typically conduct these surveys annually. We rotate every other year between residential customers versus business and key account customers. So in 2025, we surveyed our residential electric and water customers. What we do is a statewide survey of municipal utility customers and also investor-owned utility customers so that we have a benchmark comparison to how we rate across the utility landscape. And then we opted in for an additional what they call oversample survey in Palo Alto, where the contractor surveyed just Palo Alto residents. And that allows us to add some questions to the standard questions asked in the statewide survey that provide us with a deeper dive into issues that are specific to Palo Alto. And these findings are important for defining areas of improvement, our strengths, and it's also helpful for helping us set our strategic objectives. So the methodology is that we conducted this through in October through November, and I'll go to the next slide, please. And so we want to assess customer satisfaction and perception in a variety of areas that are key to us. Of course, service reliability is an example, rates and affordability, quality, emergency preparedness, infrastructure, customer programs, and engagement with CPAU services. Next slide, please. We benchmark comparison to the statewide municipal utilities and investor-owned utilities. And what we found in this survey is that CPAU significantly outperforms statewide municipal utility customers and investor-owned utilities in both the water and electric sectors across most metrics. The results indicate strong local trust and high performance and reliability and quality, and also we see perhaps some benefits from us operating a carbon-neutral, community-focused utility model. We utilize a score called Net Positive Score to give us an indication of how our customers fall on the scale of if they are loyal, if they are advocates of us, if they're satisfied customers. So you may be familiar with what's called a Net Promoter Score. This is very similar. It's related to Net Promoter Score, but a Net Positive Score reflects close alignment between what customers value and how they rate City of Palo Alto Utilities performance. So we received very high marks for the Net Positive Score. I'm happy to go into additional detail about those various scores if you're interested. Commissioner Gupta, you sent some questions earlier today, so I'm happy to address those if you'd like. Next slide.
So here's a high-level overview, a snapshot of our electric service performance and water service performance. So in electric, we received an average positive rating of 74.4%, which is a little bit higher than 2023. And you can see the comparison to our statewide municipal utilities and also IOUs. CPIU leads on 10 of 11 organizational characteristics, and we find that those higher items are reliability, outage restoration, and commitment to renewables. We received significantly higher ratings than statewide and Northern California utilities. And similarly in water, our average positive rating was around 80%, which was higher than 2023 and higher than the statewide municipal utility aggregate. And CPIU scored higher in every water characteristic. We found that our customers rated us highest for maintaining water infrastructure, promoting efficient use and conservation, monitoring water quality, and also in environmental responsibility. Next slide, please. So here is a table of organizational characteristics. Commissioner Gupta asked what organizational characteristics mean, and I wanted to quickly define that. Organizational characteristics, when it relates to a survey of utilities, for example, are key structural, operational, and cultural attributes that define how the utility functions and manages risk. So you can see a variety of elements here. You can see the comparison for CPIU from the year 2023, the last time that we surveyed residential customers, and in 2025. Then you can also see the comparison for those same elements for municipal utility customers, IOUs, and then on the far right for national standards. So CPIU ratings were significantly higher for 10 of the 11 characteristics compared to the Muni 2025 findings, and for 9 of the 11 characteristics compared to the IOU findings. CPIU overperformed in all metrics compared to the national benchmark, and as a result, the utility achieved a higher average positive rating than each respective group. While you're looking at this table, because I know that there's a lot of information here, I just want to make a quick note about the statistical significance and confidence in this data. We have strong and statistically reliable margins of errors for these surveys, for both the electric and water, at about plus or minus 4.8 and a 95% confidence level. So 5% is typically recommended in the world of marketing research. And while there's always some margin of error with survey research and analysis, being less than 5% means that if there's variability between the survey data and how customers actually think and feel about these topics on a broader scale, that variability is going to be within that plus or minus 5 percentage points. So the story is still the same in spite of that variability. We have detailed demographic slides and information in our backup slides if you're interested, if you want to dive deeper into who the respondents were to each of these surveys. Also throughout the corresponding slides, I am going to go a little bit deeper into the results from the survey respondents, and we can show a comparison between the municipal utility customers and also the investor-owned utility customers. Next slide, please. So the key findings for the electric utility show that in terms of meeting customer expectations, in 2025, CPIU scored higher in this area than in 2023 and outperformed munis by more than 7 percentage points and IOUs by close to 12 percentage points. When it comes to rates and affordability, CPIU scored higher in this area in 2025 compared to 23 and outperformed munis by more than 7 percentage points and IOUs by more than 9 percentage points. For customer service experience, we were rated higher in 2025. We're on par with the munis, but higher than the IOUs. We noted that first contact resolution dropped from 2023. We were rated lower in 2025 than the municipal utility customers, but higher than the investor-owned utility customers. So respondents with first contact resolution did report significantly higher satisfaction with customer service overall. Next slide. Emergency response and preparation. This includes outage response time, and our outage response time rated slightly higher than in 2023, on par with munis in 2025, but lower than the IOUs in 2025. Respondents felt that CPIU is well prepared to handle emergencies over 1 quarter, but that is significantly fewer than all municipal utility customers and IOU respondents in 2025. I wanted to point out the difference here on this particular slide because I think that this is an opportunity for us to seek improvement on how we communicate to our customers what we do for emergency preparation and response. So I wanted to call that out here. As it relates to communication, email clearly ranks highest over direct mail and paper bill inserts. Self-service tools were rated, self-service digital tools were rated lower than munis, but higher than in 2023. And we believe that that's probably because we have made some improvements recently with systems such as My CPAU and also, of course, the installation of AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Next slide. Electrification, obviously being a huge interest for us right now, so we asked our respondents what they thought about our electrification programs, where their interests were. So the interest is strongest for heat pump water heaters and induction cooktop stoves. We noted that upfront costs limit adoption, however. Our customers have a good familiarity with the concept of home electrification, and that's an increase from 78% in 2023, positive. There's a higher result of residents supporting CPAU's investment in electrification compared to 2023. We asked questions of respondents who indicated that they are low to moderate income, what they would be willing to pay for heat pump water heater and heat pump HVAC systems. Not surprisingly, most would prefer to pay less, and you can see that range there on the slide. Next slide. We are seeing fewer people interested in purchasing electric vehicles. That may be because they already own one or more, or perhaps some have made that financial decision in response to recent reductions in incentives. We've noted that very few are interested in solar and battery storage systems. We may see this change as technologies improve and customers can reap more cost efficiencies. We shall see. Next slide, please. And so as it relates to the electric utility, we wanted to sort of wrap this up and think about what did we hear, what are the considerations, what are our actionable items from the results that we got from this particular survey. So what we heard is customer service is strong. We did hear that the most common driver of repeated contacts is a decline in first contact resolution compared to 2023 and billing issues. Customers who find that their issue can be resolved upon the first contact provide higher satisfaction ratings. So we find that strengthening billing workflow inquiries could help protect CPAU's strong service reputation and perhaps reduce customer friction during complex interactions, such as electrification upgrades, rebates, and installation coordination. We can establish a rapid resolution review for repeat billing contacts and identify common failure points such as unclear bill language, difficulty navigating online account tools, et cetera. And seek out proactive digital tools. What more can we provide our customers that can help them self-diagnose issues before contacting support, such as estimated bill explanations or usage trend visualizations? Next slide. We did note that respondents of both income groups show a willingness to pay for electrification upgrades. However, they respond to different signals and messaging. For example, low to moderate income customers may be more interested in rebates, guidance, and financial support. High income respondents may place greater value on contractor access and convenience. We find that it will be helpful to develop income-specific messaging for these programs. And leveraging this segmentation can help CPAU boost adoption rates, especially for water heater and HVAC replacements. And some suggestions may be installation pathways for different income groups to help them through that path. And the key to success may be enhancing outreach during key replacement moments, such as emergency replacements. Next slide, please. So on to the water utility. Our organizational characteristics are listed here. You can see the rankings for CPAU in 2023, 25, and also municipal utility customers. In 2025, CPAU continued to receive consistently high positive ratings across all organizational characteristics. Customers provided the highest positive ratings for CPAU, maintaining an adequate supply of water, promoting the efficient use and conservation of water, and monitoring water quality, with approximately 9 out of 10 customers rating these characteristics positively. We noted no decreases in these characteristics recorded compared to 2023. However, some slight increases for CPAU in promoting the efficient use and conservation of water, being open and honest about company operations and policies, providing good service and value for the cost of water. This led to an overall average positive rating of 80%, which was a slight increase over 2023. And of note, CPAU achieved higher positive ratings across all organizational characteristics compared to the total municipal utility ratings in 2025. Next slide. So key findings for the water utility. The top expectations for our customers are clean water and affordable prices. We did note a high rate of CPAU meeting these expectations or most of the time. That's what we heard from survey respondents. As it relates to rates and affordability across the board, we scored well, and our customers noted that they do have trust in CPAU to keep rates affordable. However, we did find that that value was still lower than municipal utility customers. Our customers rated the overall cost of water relative to the value received as either good or very good. That's on par with 23, but also lower than municipal utility customers. Again, another opportunity for CPAU to look into our communication about the value of water. Our customers prioritize protecting local water quality and sources and keeping water rates affordable. Next slide. So we all know, as we even discussed in the last presentation, Palo Alto has a very high quality of water from the Tuolumne River delivered through the Hetch Hetchy system, and satisfaction with water quality has always been high among our customers. Clarity is the element that receives the highest positive rating, followed closely by smell and taste. When customers were asked how they would rate the quality of their water positively, or if they would rate the quality of their water positively, CPAU customers responded 17 percentage points higher than municipal utility customers. And we see a good deal of trust in CPAU to resolve water quality issues at 9.5 percentage points higher than munis. Next slide. For emergency preparedness related to water, I'm showing once again here the differences between 2023 and responses from municipal customers in 25, as I see this as an opportunity in which we can better communicate to our customers what we are doing to prepare for emergencies and also for droughts. We noted that what we heard from our customers is that those who feel CPAU is prepared to meet the challenges of another drought are about 3 percentage points lower than in 2023, and 15 percentage points lower than all municipal utility customers. So again, I think there's an opportunity for us to tell the story. And when asked about how customers feel about CPAU being prepared to handle an emergency or natural disaster, such as an earthquake or fire, the results were similar to 2023, but 20 percentage points lower than municipal utility customers. So infrastructure is part of that conversation. We did hear from respondents that they do believe our infrastructure is in good shape, and they also support investments to maintain those systems, even if it means investing in higher water rates to do so. That's on par with 2023, but also lower than municipal utility customers. Our customers do indicate they have support for investment to upgrade and maintain the water infrastructure, once again on par with 2023. And in this case, it's significantly higher than municipal utility customers. Okay, customer service, please, next slide. So I want to bring your eye to the third bullet on this slide, please, in which our respondents rated customer service as either among the best or above average compared to other service providers. CPAU customers provided higher positive ratings for all customer service characteristics compared to municipal utility customers in 2025. We still noted some declines from 2023 and lower rating than for municipal respondents, indicating another opportunity for CPAU to look at our processes and systems for improvement. It's likely that calls to customer service are for billing issues, which may be complex and may not be resolved with first contact, thus lowering the satisfaction levels even more. However, overall, 3/4 reported being satisfied with their experience. That is also lower than municipal utility customers. The most common reason, as I indicated before, is that the most common reason for perhaps lower satisfaction ratings may be a lack of resolution for first contact or high bill or consumption. And then similarly to the electric utility customer respondents, most prefer to communicate via email rather than direct mail, although we still see many people relying on utility bill inserts for their information. Luckily, now even our e-bill customers can receive those utility bill inserts, as we recently switched to a new bill print vendor who can include those inserts with the electronic bills. Next slide. As it relates to water conservation in our programs, most customers thought that the most useful tools for water efficiency would be leak detection and notifications. as well as materials on specific ways to reduce household water use at no cost. Customers have a good familiarity with the WaterSmart Home Water Report program and landscape rebate programs. And historically, Palo Alto residents have typically shown some of the highest participation in water conservation programs countywide. Most low-income customers, we wanted to find out what would be most effective to help them with installing water-efficient fixtures, would prefer upfront rebates followed by information and guidance, and then perhaps help finding a contractor followed by no-interest loans. Next slide. So the considerations we took from the water utility survey is that while CPAU performs strongly in comparison to munis for customer service performance, we did see some downward trends in 2025 compared to 2023. Satisfaction with recent interactions fell nearly 5 percentage points. First contact resolution dropped notably, down nearly half. And we found that repeat contacts are most often driven by lack of resolution in previous contacts and ongoing billing challenges, areas that can reduce customer confidence if not actively addressed. Once again, this is an opportunity for us to look at our internal processes, review billing inquiry workflows to reduce repeat contacts, focus on identifying where information gaps or ambiguous next steps create customer confusion, and build stronger follow-through practices to prevent issues from escalating. Next slide. We found that CPAU customers indicate less reassurance than other municipal utility customers about how well their utility is prepared to handle natural disasters or drought. We are currently updating our water risk and resilience assessment and emergency operation plan. This is an indication that we should share more about our efforts in this space and also talk about infrastructure, as that plays an important role in that discussion. The 2025 survey findings reveal clear variation in what low-income customers are willing to pay for high-efficiency fixtures and essential leak repairs, and customers express a strong preference for upfront rebates and straightforward guidance. So we can tailor our programs based on affordability thresholds, support long-term conservation goals among income-sensitive households, and ensure lower-cost options are accessible to customers with limited budget. And that concludes the summary of the results of these two surveys. I would like to say it was an extensive survey with around 86 or more questions for each survey. So there's a lot of data to unpack in there. And I tried to summarize some of the key highlights that I thought would be most interesting to the commission and share with you our areas of strength and then the areas that we have identified where we'd like to look into what we can do to improve our service. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Open for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Questions?
Public comment.
Oh, public comment. Thank you for that.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 3, please raise your hand or press star now. There are no hands raised online and no in-person public comment.
All right. Then to the commission, any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you again for the presentation and for the results. It looks like we're doing incredibly well. I think that's a great indicator. So I commend the staff on running a great operation. You've already seen my questions. You answered a ton of them in your presentation. I'm grateful for that. I did have a few questions on survey methodology. What were the sample sizes like? You answered my question on, what the confidence interval looks like. But I am curious about sample sizes, kind of the demographics we have in our sample, and the modes of collecting the survey. It was helpful to learn it was 86 questions per survey, which is a highly detailed survey. Whether we incentivize with payments or not to complete the survey. Do you have that information on hand now, or?
I do.
Okay, awesome. Maybe we could go one by one then.
Sure. So these were digital surveys. So our customers were sent a link to a survey, so it was all online. And we did not offer an incentive for customers to take the survey. It was all voluntary. We collected a total of around 400 responses each for the electric and the water utility surveys. And we do have profiles on the demographics of the respondents in some of the backup slides, if you'd like to drill down into that, or I can summarize, because we saw similar demographics across both electric and water utility.
Oh, sure, yeah, so a summary would be great, and maybe along with that summary, I think in the considerations somewhere, it noted that we wanted to increase representation in some ways. I don't know if that would cover that question too.
May I ask you to go to a backup slide? It should be number 26. And while we are navigating to that slide, I can say in general, what we saw is a trend for both the electric and water utility customer respondents. We saw a majority of those respondents being male, aged 55 to 64 or 65 and older, Caucasian, with a postgraduate degree. So here is a snapshot of the respondents for the electric utility survey. And then we can go to the water utility survey, which is similar, skewed perhaps a little bit more towards the slightly older generation, but very similar respondents. And so that is why there was a comment in the staff report that it would be prudent for us to work with the consultant on identifying ways to ensure we are gathering a statistical representation of the Palo Alto community.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that answers my question. I mean, just looking at the slide right now, I can see that we're pretty biased towards folks who own and folks who are in single-family homes. I think one area where we may want to increase the representation in the next survey is folks who rent, which I think is around half of Palo Alto, and folks who are in apartments or condos and townhomes. So thank you.
Can I just ask, did we get these slides? I don't believe that we received any backup slides. Did people receive the backup slides? I have not seen.
We did not provide the full report from the contractor as part of the packet to the commission. Each report is more than 40 pages. And so our intention was to summarize some of the key takeaways in the staff report and then utilize this presentation to complement the information in the staff report, do it a bit more of a deeper dive. But we can happily share this information.
Sorry, I would like to double down and just say I would have liked to have received the full survey. We had a very small packet, hardly anything in it, and so I would love to see any kind of graphic, the original and the backup slides if possible. And I think it should be shared with the public.
Yeah, so, we were following the past practice of back in, I think, 2023. We had some conversations. We can certainly include that as an informational item for the next, so the public will have an ability to access that as well. Or is it something we can do for after action report? I'm looking for staff on best practice. Yeah, we'll put it in the next packet.
Thank you.
With these raw survey results, it says oversampling in this. Did they do an oversampling adjustment to Palo Alto, or do they do what is the oversampling all about?
The oversample is an additional survey that is conducted of just Palo Alto customers, in addition to what was conducted prior to that, a statewide survey of all municipal utility customers and investor-owned utility customers, which would include Palo Alto, but the sample size from Palo Alto from that statewide survey would be very, very small. And so with a focus on Palo Alto through the oversample, then we're able to gain greater insight into what's happening in our community, and we use the results as a benchmark comparison to the other utility customers.
It's not really an oversample, it's just a separate survey. Is that?
We ask the same questions in the oversample, and then we also add a few Palo Alto specific questions, for example, about our programs.
Okay. A little different from I think the standard understanding of oversampling is, but it's fine.
And I just did want to add as well, the city of Palo Alto does also have a residential survey that goes out. And, when you look at that and we do comparisons and contrasts for, versus what we get from those standardized questions, we were actually, our utility building options were ranked very high with the community. But we did see similarities on rebates. We saw 58% of respondents looking for additional rebates. And so this is another way to get information, and kind of get a pulse of the community. And you also see the type of demographic that responds to these types of surveys. So while we had discussions with Great Blue, is this statistically significant? They felt it was yes, but we also could see that there are certain demographics that would most likely answer all of these questions. So nonetheless, it's good information for us, it's not the only piece of information, but we take it in totality.
So, and just one last question. I had a couple people come to me who had trouble with the link to the survey and weren't able to take it, and they got it. Did you hear anything about that?
We did.
Systematically, two different people came to me and said, look, and expecting me to solve their problem for them, but I'm saying, we tried to go to this link and it didn't work. And did you hear anything about that, or was that an issue?
We did unfortunately hear from a few customers that they had some difficulty accessing the link at the very beginning of the survey timeline, and we notified the contractor immediately. They corrected it. So it's unfortunate that that happened when the survey first began. We are going to make sure we work with the contractor moving forward to ensure that quality assurance is in place and that we are affirming with our customers that these surveys are legitimate. They are legitimately coming from City of Palo Alto utilities. That's something that we noted, and we did communicate very clearly to the contractor that it's extremely important to us.
Okay.
Yeah, and, getting at our messaging through our social and other networks, maybe as a bill insert or otherwise, and saying, hey, we're doing this survey. We'd love you to, give us your thoughts. And then also looking at the number of questions. So, when you have a large survey, if it's that long in length, sometimes you may not get people finishing. So just looking at optimizing that as well. We had a lot of staff who really wanted to do a deeper dive and get information. We got some. We're going to optimize this over time.
And another point on kind of optimizing for Palo Alto, the questions you said that some of the questions were for Palo Alto. One example, the household income data is almost not a great set of categories for Palo Alto, I think, because the level is 100,000 or more, which demographically in Palo Alto, that will be a good chunk of the city. So I think in terms of understanding what we consider low income here, I think we should think through these types of questions and making sure that they apply well to Palo Alto when we're thinking about how to make sure we have a statistical representation of the population. I know that can be difficult because even other demographic collections only collect $250,000 or more in annual income. But to the extent we can get better data, I think that would be helpful. And then my last comment, and you have my full collection of comments already. My last comment here is on the KPIs. So we have some action items. I think it'd be helpful to make them into KPIs. That hey, we had this reduction in repeat billing contacts. We'd like to increase contact resolution by X percentage points. I think having something specific so we can kind of track how we're doing year to year would be helpful. Thank you again.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm super happy to see how positive we are in terms of our ratings relative to other utilities. I think one thing that's kind of interesting for me sitting in this seat is that normally I'm in a corporate setting where we're competing with others, whereas utilities are kind of monopoly. So there's, I think, a different view on these. So when I see all these really good results, I'm actually used to taking kind of an opposite approach, where you're like trying to break through and you're like, where are we falling down? And just really focusing on the negatives rather than the positives. I know, I get it. I'm seeing this and I'm seeing how great we are in so many areas, but we are a municipal, so our customers are us, everybody is the utility. They make up the utility. So when I see that a quarter of customers are not happy in a certain area, like if we see, especially a place where you put somewhat confident, like you're very confident or somewhat, I feel like somewhat is so weak. Like I want to see the bar chart, how many people are in the very versus the somewhat. And if our customers are like 75% are in that group, but 50% are in the somewhat, that means 50% are somewhat and the rest are not confident. So I kind of want to be a little bit more critical. Personally, that's when I see a survey, I'm like trying to really get into how do we need to get better. So I look at it as I want to really dig into those areas where we're not doing as well and see how we can improve. So for me, I would really love to see the survey and just see that, and I hope that internally in the utility, we're also taking that view, where we're really trying to drill in. There was an indication on one place where it was like, I think it was a data point on electrification, where it was like people who aren't interested, these are the barriers to their interest, right? So clearly, we're getting some qualitative on some of these questions, and I think that's great. We need to have qualitative feedback to figure out how to actually get better on that metric. So it's just a comment about perspective, like whether to present something in a really positive light versus really drill in on the shortcomings. And I'd love to see us really drill in on the shortcomings. And then as a follow-up comment, I feel like a lot of the areas where we are short, it's because people don't know. It's because we haven't communicated something to them. It's not because we're actually bad. I mean, in some cases, where they didn't have a resolution on the first call, that's not great, right? But in a lot of other cases, it seems like it's just a shortcoming of communication. And I do understand from past meetings that we don't have a communication method with every single customer. Like we might not have an email on file for customers. So I would actually have as a goal, just becoming aware of it through the survey, that we have a goal for the utility that every single customer has an email associated with their account and a phone number, or one or the other, because things like getting a really high bill, like you could have warned that person, they probably have a water leak, maybe they have something going on, and I'm getting those. I personally signed up for the alerts. They're fantastic. I'm so happy to have them, but when someone ends up with a $1,000 bill or a $2,000 bill, no wonder they're upset, right? So I feel like not only could we, if we set ourselves to have a goal of a way to communicate with every single person who's a customer, we can not only warn them of bad events that are coming, but we can also communicate about all these great things about our city, our goals, our utility with every customer in a more reliable way. And I've advocated for physical mailings in the past. I don't think we've ever really done that, but if we had an electronic means, we could start doing that and better educate our populace. So I think we would solve a lot of these problems where people aren't very confident about our service.
If I could just add, and I think you'll see that when you see the reports, is that there was a lot of I don't know, right? They just didn't know what our level of emergency preparedness was at related to the utility for whatever reason. It might be that subset of the demographics as well. This is done every 2 years, so kind of looking at those, the results, and then kind of what we're looking at considerations. I think we're kind of looking at yes, we're good on this. Yes, our water quality is good. Yes, people are happy with the utility. It's one of the highest ranking utilities at Palo Alto in all the surveys. And what else can we do? And I think that's what Catherine has gone through, is like, they need to know more about emergency preparedness. They need to know about our programs. They'd like to see more rebates. That information is being fed into our processes with our staff, so it doesn't go in a black box. We put it on a shelf. We have some conversations with Great Blue Research, what their findings are, some of the recommendations, and we have summarized those in here as well. So I think you'll see that, when you see the report. That's the great part of doing these types of surveys, is actually do something with them, or why do them. So those are highlighted in the considerations.
So we have talked before about how to get, the inserts are fantastic, how to get those in front of people who have electronic bills. And I guess my point on the communication and having an electronic mode of communication with every customer is you could have additional informational mailings, right, emailings, or communication. So it's not just the inserts in the bill, or maybe that gets turned into a different way of communicating. I just think that everyone's got email these days. I mean, if you could serve them things and you're not going to force them to open it, there's always problems with open rates on every type of communication. But I do think that there's no excuse. If someone's getting like a high bill warning on their email and they come in later and they said, I had a $2,000 water bill and I'm upset about it, you could say, well, you got an email on whatever date. And then, eventually we train people to look for those things.
Anyone else?
Yeah. go, you go.
Yeah, one question that you're, first of all, good report, a lot of good information. Is there a commercial survey kind of analogous to this?
Yes, we rotate. Every other year, we survey our residential customers. The following year, we will survey our business and key account customers. So we surveyed the business and key account customers in 2024, came to the commission with the results, and in 2026, we plan to survey that group as well. And so we'll probably be coming back to you with the results of those business customer surveys in early 2027.
And then on this consideration, address uncertainties of preparedness to handle natural disasters or drought, it sounded like there's a plan for doing something about that.
There was a lot of, in the responses, I don't know what our plans are, and, we have talked to the Office of Emergency Services as they put their packets together. What can we do more? We're looking at our literature in terms of leaning into maybe some more additional information. I mean, we did want to make sure that, the considerations that are coming before the UAC, that we're capturing your insights, because that's helpful, providing you that additional report. But we are planning to move forward with these some of the suggestions and considerations. So just wanted to see if there's any others here, because just being mindful of your time and understanding you do want to see that report as well. Just trying to be as effective in moving forward. We do see putting these into the bill inserts as one option, updating our output to the community, our websites and such, and providing more of this information. Again, it's a 2-year cycle, and this is one survey, so we want to keep that in context with the overall one that we have for the utility. There's other areas that we'd like to also improve on. That's kind of the DNA for the utility as we look at other surveys that we do annually in Palo Alto.
So in that specific issue, the question, as I recall, about drought was something like, the answer was something like, we're not sure that CPAU is prepared for drought, which could mean either they think we're not prepared, or they don't really know what our plans are.
Or we haven't had a drought in several years. I mean, we can talk about some of our preparations, what that looks like. I think this is a valuable point of information for us, but I don't want us to overreact, not overreact.
I was just trying to ask a question. Yes. What do you think? In others, do people feel we are not prepared, or they just are not educated about what our...
It was a lot of I don't know, right? So it's also how we word those questions, right? So, and then regardless, if the residents feel that we can provide or don't have that information, doesn't mean we can't reinforce that information, at least on our website or in our communications.
Good.
Thank you. I emailed you, or I hope it got to you, on this, and you addressed a number of my questions. But if we believe in if we believe in this survey, and I do share Commissioner Croft's question, or in really understanding those segments, somewhat supportive, very supportive, digging into that might temper our belief in these results. But if we believe in these results, it's something we ought to promote. I mean, it's something we ought to communicate to our customer base, because, a third-party statewide body has surveyed customers, and then they've compared our results to our previous results and to other, and just like we tout the fact that our rates are lower than PG&E, something like this might be worthy of an article, a column, an opinion piece, that sort of thing. Just a thought. But I also want to put a second or an exclamation mark on Commissioner Gupta's recommendation for turning some of these considerations into KPIs. So both the point there and also the point from Commissioner Croft on digging a little deeper into what the customers are really saying with this data would give greater confidence that we can believe in these results. Because, you know, like the point made earlier, if 10 or 20 or 30% of people are not on the enthusiastic side of the survey, I mean, that shouldn't surprise us. Sometimes those voices are the loudest. Those are the ones you read in the newspaper. That columnist that talks about the utility all the time, typically in a negative light, about rates and about transferring money and, you know, so to the general fund. So these are all things that call on us to, you know, promote the good news, promote all this. I also want to just ask a rhetorical question. Are we going to vote on this? Is there a vote or a motion to be had on this agenda item?
No.
It's a rhetorical question because I knew the answer. And I do want to point out that in this meeting where we've talked about the two main items have been the customer survey and the data center update. And in the last meeting where the two main topics were grid mod and fiber update, we have not voted at the UAC on anything of substance other than to approve the minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last two meetings. And that begs the question, what our function is to advise council. What is council to take from all of the time that you've put into presenting to us and we've put into listening? What is council to take from everything we've talked about tonight and last month if we're not voting on anything? That's really a question as much for my colleagues here as for you, but and perhaps there's no answer tonight, but just to get a presentation and ask questions doesn't seem to be fulfilling the advisory function of the UAC.
I mean, in terms of, if it's a question to colleagues, like it warrants a response, I think part of our function is to ask the kind of questions that council might ask. And I think we're doing that, right? Informationally or voting, I don't think for many of these topics that the vote is the critical piece. The discussion is the critical piece. The raising issues is the critical piece. To the extent that we're asked specifically for input that is not actionable, that would be bad. But given that we're often being asked for, you know, what are the values upon which we should be structuring our decisions, that is actionable, even if it's not an action being taken.
We're being asked by whom?
By staff?
May I just add that this also goes as an informational report to City Council, and, you know, staff will be taking this discussion and conversation and putting that into that report that does go to council. So I did want to mention that as well, to your point, Commissioner Tukers, like, where does this go? And while I don't want to talk about the previous discussion, you know, there are actions and activities that came from that are meaningful for the utility and kind of moving forward. So I think there is a value associated with that. If there are other items, the council did approve the UAC work plan just recently, right? In terms of looking at, you know, data center competitiveness and other issues. So there is a method, and if, you know, the commission wants to put together something as a recommendation to City Council, you know, that's something that is always available to you.
There are people on the dais here who know how this works better than I do. They're on the council or they've been on the council. But I would assume that, you know, if I were the council and I put a UAC in place and the UAC spends time listening to an update on fiber, on grid mod, on customer survey, on data centers, I'd kind of want to know, well, so what did the UAC think about all this? Did they like the customer survey results? Did they have recommendations for how they should have been done better or what we should do with them? And we did, I guess, but how will council know that other than to watch along YouTube?
I personally would like to see some of our recommendations be built into the considerations. So the slides that are at the end where you're asking us for input, so for example, on the things that I mentioned, I would like to see us make an effort to have an electronic means of communicating with every single customer. I believe we should have that. I don't know if others support that. I'd like to hear if they do. And then I would also like us to delve into the areas where we have market shortcomings. So why are we having failure to solve the customer's problem on the first call, right? And I think that was in your considerations, but I would specifically want to dig into that one. And then the non-confidence in the drought. So I would like to see our feedback be built into the consideration slides, if that's a reasonable thing to ask.
I'd also like to hear, I thought your viewpoint on this, Councilmember Lowing.
Yeah, but I don't want to usurp any commissioners' comments. I think taking the survey is a good example. You give a lot of feedback to staff on how you think it would work better next year and where it didn't work. Sorry, I should talk more, right? So this didn't happen all. So that feedback is in process for next year, but there are other issues that you'll talk about, like the data centers, that's not the last time you're going to see it. So this is sort of, again, input to them on what are you thinking, what direction we should take. So next time it comes back, it probably will be a vote. So everything that doesn't happen in the first meeting. And I reflect on, my experience on the Planning Commission. We used to get, for example, updates on new state housing laws that came in, not applicable to anything that was a project in front of us, but they were going to be on anything that did come to us that had to do with housing going forward in the next X numbers of years. So some of these items are to update you folks, and I don't think you would have liked it if they didn't give you the results of the survey. So
these are things we asked for, and I mean, we've all asked for and have been looking forward to the data center discussion. It's all good. I'm just asking a higher level process question of, ages ago, I said, what's the A in UAC? And what's the point of long discussions that, and when council can't really take any advisory from them, other than just to try to watch, like I said, watch the video or parse the minutes. And so, yeah, I do take your point that we are educated and informed for next time, and that's something. But there are agenda items on Finance Committee and on Council, like in March, that water, for example, that we could have and should have perhaps been voting on. It seems to me, and so I just want to point out that 2 meetings with no votes on significant items is probably not the ideal agenda setting.
Anyone else have anything further?
I just add my 2 cents. I'm still noodling on, I think, a very important question that you've raised and others have raised on this. I like to think about it procedurally. We're not going to be sending on every single issue votes forward to council. I feel like kind of the vote that we take is kind of like the first crack, and then council gets to see how one group, their advisory group, took a vote on an issue, and then it's actually a vote that's been lined up for them. And not every issue is going to be something that's lined up as a vote for council. But I do think that we do talk a lot internally as a commission about certain issues, and we can always take votes, I suspect, internally as to kind of how we'd like to operate and things we'd like to see. So I wonder if there is a balance in between those 2 things. But I do see value in having discussion only topics as well, especially as Councilmember Lowing raised. There's going to be topics that come up over time for us that won't necessarily reach council yet. But you also, Commissioner Tucker raises a great point that sometimes the issues do go to council without us having taken a vote. So that's kind of, I like to think about it procedurally, and maybe there are better places where we can take votes. Maybe there are places we can take internal votes. For example, where Commissioner Croft would like to see changes in some direction. And then also places where discussion might be the best thing for us.
Could we?
What do you mean by an internal vote exactly? I mean, there's votes and there's, either we vote or we don't.
Yeah, I mean, like, like a vote, that's not an issue being lined up for council to take a vote. You know, it goes from us to finance sometimes to council, but a vote for the operation of our commission. Like, hey, how are, you know, we'd like to see changes in, you know, within the work plan that council has already approved, for example, data centers, we'd like to see staff take a look at X, Y, and Z, and we vote on that as a commission, as part of our running work plan.
Except I actually think it's important to clarify whether we have the ability or authority to direct staff work. And I think that the answer to that is no. Council can direct staff work when we advise council. So if we wanted to pass something that says, we advise council to advise the staff to direct the work, we can do that. We also have a soft power role in asking strategic questions of staff that incentivize them to do the work that we want them to do, right?
Yeah, no,
so it is like the carrot or the stick, and I mean, I don't know. I'm here and enjoy working with all of you and enjoy working with staff. I think the goal is to help things move forward quickly. It's not to make things excessively procedural and require that it goes pass through another body necessarily.
So Chris, I think I'll just respond to your question. I think this was the first crack at the data center. I think that staff wanted to get a temperature feeling of how do we feel about data centers. I think what we said each individually was very helpful to staff. I mean, staff, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure that we're actually playing the advisory role to council. We're playing advisory role to staff here a little bit, who will then bring this back at some point and then eventually will advise council. You know, I think we asked for a little bit more data on this. We, you know, I don't think it's ripe really to take a vote. We could have had a vote that said, shall we go full bore on data centers? Or, you know, I'm not sure that would have gained us anything other than what we gave staff. But I mean, that's a judgment call. In terms of the survey, I think staff took the feedback. Yes, we could have had a vote. Next survey you do, we would like you to do X, X, and Y. You know, I think.
Council to direct you.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Because it has to.
That's true. It would be like, we want you to bring it to council to tell council. You know, we could do that, right? But I think, you know, it's rare when we hear survey results for it to be set up that way. Most of it's for us to have an understanding of what the public said. And the secondary purpose was we gave feedback on a bunch of this stuff. And I agreed with the feedback. I found over the years, and if we found it differently, that staff listens to us. You know, and as long as staff listens to us, I'm not sure there's just really this need to say, we want income above 100. They heard us. And I don't know what that means when they talk to their consultants and stuff. So anyway, that's my thought on it, Chris, is I think we're getting there.
One thought, I think the direction of what Commissioner Tucker wants to do, you know, to advise, you know, keep council up to date on what UAC is advising, which is our role after all. Maybe could we just simply have a 1 or 2 paragraph summary of each topic? You know, the sense of UAC was that the survey was great. We would like to turn some of these considerations into KPIs, you know, or whatever we think it is, you know, that the group has agreed, or some of the people, you know, said gung-ho on data centers, other people thought this. You know, if I were a councilman, I think that's what I would like to see would be a kind of boil down, because the kind of questions I get from them, if I run into somebody, is something, hey, we're talking about X next meeting. What do you think, or what does UAC think about it?
So I want to point out that, I don't know if you noticed, but our new mayor, Vicky Venker, was actually in the audience for data centers. So it's not like they're not listening to us. We have Ed, who was mayor last year, who, you know, literally can go to council and does. I mean, and says, you know what, the UAC, Ed's now going to be on the finance committee. There'll be a direct line. You know, I would hope that Ed would tell us if he doesn't feel we're doing our advisory role properly. I really would. And, you know, I haven't heard him say, he hasn't called me personally about it, or hasn't, you know, said, Greg, I think you need to do this differently, or the commission hasn't told us. So I'm feeling fairly comfortable that council is hearing hearing us? And if they're not, Ed, please, please tell us what we need to do differently.
Yeah, I think in that regard, I mean, we did look at your work plan Monday, and one of the things that came up with this commission and others is that we're actually quite enthusiastic about having representatives from UAC, for example, come when there are important agenda items as not only a resource, but as we also said from the dais, we don't want them just to have to sit there for 2 hours. We want them to actually give us their opinion. So we want it to be an oral participation. So that was, based on the work plan, but also I echoed in the meeting that was a very high interest of you folks. And the idea, as I've already said, of some designee coming to the Finance Committee, I've also thought is a good idea. And yeah, I'm now chairing that as well. So that's a good connection with the kind of impact that you have on finances and the recommendations. Just so as I have the mic, what Commissioner Metz said, doing a summary of of anything that's not on our agenda may not get to us anyway, because we get staff reports on things that are from the agenda, unless you say this is really important and we want it to come to council independently, other than through me and my own announcements or whatever. Sure, that could be arranged, but it's not, that wouldn't be routine because we're so jammed with agenda items that unless it was an agenda item that was a study session instead of action item, and then that would probably involve some of you as well. So on balance, I don't think that summary is practical. If it's something that you want us to act on, because we can't really respond to it either. But if it's that important, then you need to flag that, and we'll find out a way to get it there in your voice instead of my voice.
So what I'm taking out of this is if staff, you, Alan, if you could tell us when something's going to go to council that we have previously discussed, and then we will appoint someone to go talk to either the council or the finance committee, on that date. And the earliest you can tell us that, if we've discussed it, we should send someone. That's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
So at every director's report, I would hope you would say, council's going to hear this item, you heard this item, you reviewed this item on such and such a date. We're going to need someone from the UAC to go represent the UAC's view. And then, that person can then work with staff, look and see what the UAC's view was, and craft what they're going to say to council about it.
Yes, so.
Because we have minutes.
Well, I guess the only other thing I'd say is that I think we had the same discussion like 2-3 months ago. We agreed that if we were voting on something, like as we vote on something, if it's going to council, anyone can say, hey, I want to make sure that this is represented, right? So the onus is on all of us to
I think we're going to make the onus on staff to tell us, and then I'm going to actually ask, and as long as I'm chair, chair, who wants to go, and we will go ahead and make that happen. Because I think the difference is from our last discussion is I was at the meeting for council on Monday, and there was support at council to have somebody from the boards and commissions to go, and they actually spoke that a lot of times people have gone and they don't really speak, but they're going to provide them an opportunity to speak, and that's going to be built into the system. And I think that's what's changed.
Okay.
And so therefore, I think we should really institutionalize this and have someone go speak.
Okay, so we have 2 items here, and I'm going to go back to data centers just a little bit. It's the first bite at this apple. It's a big discussion. It's not only being discussed here, it's being, as I said, statewide. It's being discussed at the legislature. It's being discussed with all the utilities throughout the state. It's being discussed at a public meeting on the Water Commission at Valley Water in terms of the water use for data centers. So there's a lot of conversations on data centers. That's just fact. So, getting your input, talking about through some strategies is very helpful for us. Answering those questions of the communities on where we are in competitiveness, where we are under rates. To your point, we ticked through your main questions and tried to give you that first cut of what that looks like and get some input. Tremendously helpful. And And then this informational item, we're going to be taking your input and discussion here and putting that informational report to council. If this body wants to send someone, that is the choice of this body. And that is absolutely, as Councilmember Long mentioned, is part of the UAC Commission. I did also want to mention, we filter in some of these discussion items in between where we come for you for recommendations, especially on our rates, our capital projects, our urban water management plan, our wildfire mitigation plan, where we have you vote and accept reports. So if you look, coming in April, we have at least 2 items that are coming for vote. And in April, we have a slew of items. A majority of items, so at least 4 out of the 5 items are coming as well. So, we try to balance these discussions. We knew data centers was going to be a longer one, and we wanted to give some opportunity and breadth to have those discussions. And, as we move forward, we can bring information back. As we have more concrete, customers coming back, we can bring that back as well, and you'll see some of those, because we know that's important. But absolutely, we appreciate that input. And I would want to know if we will provide information of when that's going to go to council for the informational report on this item. And we can do so going forward. It would be helpful as a commission. If you would want to send somebody, we can make sure we know who that representative is, and we can make sure we're coordinating with that person.
Greg, could I just, one more comment, please?
All right.
First of all, I'll look back and then I'll look forward. Looking back as an example, I can't help but think of the One Water report. We had One Water report informationals. It was my very first meeting in like July, a year and a half ago. And we might have at the time at least expressed to council, there are some concerns. Well, I don't know if we sent any advisory other than the minutes to council that there were concerns about One Water until we finally made a decision, and then boom, the report had been essentially rejected. So that's just one example how, as we just are in early days on something, in that case it was water, in this case it's data centers, it seems useful possibly that we at least formalize, and Phil, I've been throwing ideas against the wall and I don't have a solution given Brown Act and how do you do all this in a timely fashion, how one might do a written advisory to council just to say, if you care, we did talk about this topic and it was a great report, but we had a few concerns, these are they, it's nice and short, but I don't know how to do that in a way that works, and we're not going to solve that now. Looking forward though, in March, for the Finance Committee, they're talking water rates and wastewater rates. Now, we didn't talk about those tonight. I don't know what UAC discussions and votes or anything feed into that very important topic next month in front of Finance Committee. It is on our agenda next month also, and I don't know exactly how the calendar works, but in the past I've seen things like, 2-3 days in it, between the 2 meetings, and the PowerPoint presentations are identical. It's not as if all the things that get thrashed around here at UAC then find their way into new and improved presentations. I guess that probably varies as a function of calendar, how many days are between our discussions and then councils. But, that's going to happen in March, and then in April, it's electric and gas. And this is just a rhetorical question, but what UAC input specifically is going to go into those?
So the UAC makes recommendation to approve the rates. The conversations and input goes into the reports. It goes to UAC first, then the finance subcommittee, and then to full council. So I'm hearing what you're saying, but it's a pretty standard process that we bring to the UAC in terms of that. So, and if the timing of the meetings is such that it's posted, we take the information that you have and then add it as a supplemental. So, I'm not really understanding your concern there.
My concern is
I think we have that, we do this every year.
Well, okay, my concern is that sometime in March, staff will be presenting to Finance Committee, and 2 days or 2 weeks, I don't know, prior, we'll be discussing that very same presentation. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what it says. I don't know how we're going to react to it. But in the past, I've noticed that there's no time for you to take anything that comes from our discussions, and change the slides. So I've just.
The intent is not to change staff presentation. The intent is to get the feedback from the UAC. And just to level set on our water rates, other rates, we also come to the UAC with our preliminary projections on a 5-year basis. So it's recognize it's the 5 utilities and, but we have a process where the UAC has that. We have a process where the UAC has created a subcommittee to take a look at this as well. So I'm pushing back a little bit on it's in terms of being a surprise. It's a standard process that we go through.
And that's a case where we do vote, right? Yeah, I mean, we vote. I mean, we can turn it down.
And
You
I'm
do vote.
assuming we'll send someone to the finance.
You do vote, you
We
provide
should.
that input. I mean, I think those are, especially on rates, that's one of the, your number one priority is in terms of your first one.
All right, on to the next topic, right, which is commissioner comments.
We've had them.
I sort of feel like we've had them too, to be honest, but
I got the public comment from the person who could not call in, who said he was still remaining on the wait. He was still waiting. Should I read his very brief?
go ahead and read his public comment. That's
Okay.
fine.
Let me just see what let me open it. It's from Sven Thiessen. He said, "My phone continues to say waiting. My comment question would be given the utility has the word safe in their mission statement, I would ask the UAC to recommend, just as the utility provides significant warning about the dangers of natural gas and associated explosions, et cetera, that the utility also provide information on the emissions from natural gas stoves, including the carcinogen, benzene, and the criteria pollutant, NOx, NOx, Sven." That's it.
All right, thank you. With that, we're adjourned.
I have one comment meeting. Today, NASM, National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine, had a webinar on understanding and addressing energy affordability, trends in U.S. electricity prices. It was just an hour or two, but it was pretty good. On the 25th, they're having an all-day workshop on the same topic, so folks might be interested. It can be in person in Washington if you feel like it, or on Zoom, of course. Also, I had one comment, which is I got the presentations for today's meeting today, like middle of the afternoon.
We all did.
Okay. I found it really hard to prepare effectively, receiving a 28-page presentation for item 2 with 2 pages of references. To go through that in a few hours, especially since I wasn't.
Note that we were unhappy, no need to respond.
Right. Well, it's just that it would be good going forward.
I just told staff to note that we're unhappy.
In the interest of self.
Smile.
Give it a smile, we're unhappy. All right, we're adjourned.
Okay.